Hi, everybody. Rick here. We just wanted to say up front that this week we ran into some technical difficulties in terms of the audio. Roughly about 1 hour in, Ben's microphone came unplugged, unbeknownst to the two of us. We didn't notice it over Discord, and we just continued our conversation. It's a really good conversation, but like I said, roughly an hour in, Ben's microphone switches to his webcam, which isn't as nice as his nice microphone. I did what I could with editing to make it sound as good as possible, but you might notice a quality shift, and we just wanted to come up front and say we apologize about that. It's still a really good episode, and we'll make sure that we keep an eye out so that doesn't happen again. We really pride ourselves on, delivering the best quality product that we can, and we both listened to it, and Ben suggested, just putting a little disclaimer up front. So once again, we apologize. Totally cool if you skip this one, but I think it's a really good episode. So without further ado, Bioshock Infinite. Take it away, boys.
I may not always love you, but long as there are stars above you, you never need to doubt it. I'll make you so sure about it. God only knows what I'd be without you. And if you should ever leave me,
My name is Rick Firestone.
My name is Ben Bugale, and you're listening to pixelprojectradio, a video game and video game club-style podcast where we play, discuss, dream about the games that we and you love. Today, we're doing two things. We're holding a vigil for our friend Vince, who is not with us at this time, and we miss him tremendously. And we are discussing at length Bioshock Infinite. But before we get started, Rick, how are you doing this fine day?
I'm doing well. Yeah, we don't know where Vince is, but we will trooper on, like the Patriots we are. I hated saying that. How are you?
I'm fine. I'm okay. You know what I mean? Like I'm okay. I'm doing all right. I got through the game. Listen to me speak English. I've lit so many candles, and I've got a framed photo of Vince in my backyard surrounded by these candles because we're waiting for him to, no, I'm doing all right. Here we are discussing the second game. I guess it's technically the third game in the Bioshock family, is it not? Because we had Bioshock, which we played, Bioshock 2, which we did not play, at least not for this series. And now, today, we are kind of putting a bow on it with Bioshock Infinite.
Yeah, that's right. And we'll say up front, we're not going to talk about the DLC, at least not on this episode. It's just going to be the base game, not the based game. This isn't a very based game, if you ask me. And yeah, you're right, Ben. So the Bioshock series, it's not entirely disconnected. If you play 1, you can play 2, and that's a sort of continuation. But if you don't play 2, you're not missing out on anything in Infinite. So it's not a trilogy in that strictest sense of the word.
The way it's been described to me is that Bioshock 2 sort of functions as a pseudo Rogue One to episode 3 and 4 in Star Wars. It's sort of, it fills in some gaps, and it bridges some things. So yeah, we're not going to be discussing that game at this time. That's not to say that we wouldn't ever, but we are not doing exactly what Rick said. We're not doing the extra stuff. We're not doing Burial at Sea, though I most certainly will play it.
Yeah. So do you want to just jump right in?
Where am I jumping? Should I jump in or should I jump up?
You jump all around, for all I care.
Jump around.
It's a free country.
What? Jump around? Sorry.
Or you could jump on it if you prefer. Houston, jump on it. Pittsburgh, jump on it.
Illinois.
Philadelphia. How many states and cities can we name before listeners tune out, do you think?
South Bend? Jump on it?
I like that there's a question mark after that one.
I don't know if they do much jumping in South Bend. Anyhow, where shall we begin, Richard?
Well, why don't we start with our one sentences and then we can see where that takes us.
I'm a little nervous.
It's okay, baby. Why don't you? Do you want to kick us off?
No. Yeah, I'll go first. All right. So let me start by saying about this game before I actually read my sentences. This game was different for me than Bioshock, obviously, because it is. It's a different beast. And part of me really agrees with my review. And then part of me really liked the first Bioshock more. So I don't know how to really verbalize that. So I'll just read this review for the time being. Bioshock Infinite takes us to another level of gaming with well-crafted storytelling and enough twists and turns to make any 1950s parent concerned. Columbia provides a perfect canvas on which this tumultuous tale transforms. 9.4 out of 10. Yeah, it's, again, the disclaimer before. But I'd overall say 9.4 out of 10.
Wowee, this is going to be an interesting episode. What did you mean about 1950s parents? I don't get that.
Doing the twist. You know, no child should be doing the twist. You know, whenever like Chubby Checker's like demanding all these, and then even the Beatles are like twist and shout, and like, so now don't you be twisting. Dancing's a sin.
God damn it, Ben.
Hey.
We're not even 10 minutes in and you're already out funnying me.
But this game for me, honestly, it could have gone either way because I loved the first Bioshock a lot, but this one, part of me loved it more, part of me did not like it. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts, and your sentence is?
Yeah, yeah. It's two. It's two sentences. Because I'm a rebel, but I'm a safe rebel. I think outside the box, but not too far outside the box. Okay. Okay. So here we go. I don't believe that sequels or remakes generally taint source material, but Bioshock Infinite wards close. A work that went through development hell, the outcome was a jumbled mess of narrative, irresponsible use of theming, and watered-down gameplay overtly trying to pander to as many demographics as possible, leaving it with little character and a sense of too many ideas in the jelly bean jar. This is a 3 out of 10 for me. This is legitimately the worst game I have played in 2021 so far.
Wow.
Yeah. I feel strongly about that. So it'll be interesting to, I think, and that's not to say I don't think it does everything poorly. I think it does some stuff well, but the stuff, like, it doesn't balance out the scales for me. The stuff that it does well is either too little too late, or it just pales in comparison to the things that I think they absolutely stumbled, and it's not even stumbled. They just either dropped the ball or just chose not to do things in a way that they've proven that they could do.
So my question, it sounds like you're upset with, or not upset with, but critical of ideologies in the game rather than gameplay itself. That's what I'm picking up on.
No, it's both. It's both. The gameplay to me felt like a generic. It felt like they were trying to pander to a wider audience. And at the time that this was, created, and, to a certain extent now, FPS was the most popular thing. And to me, this just felt like a Halo clone or a Call of Duty clone. It didn't have any of the planning or the traps of the original. It just wasn't. I mean, it's not the same. It doesn't feel like Bioshock. So it's not just the ideology and the narrative, but I don't like those either. Don't get me wrong, but yeah, the gameplay, it just didn't do it for me either.
Yeah, I was curious to know because I find your review fascinating. I'm not going to obviously knock it or anything because I'm not one of those people, but I am curious to know more as we unfold and talk about the game and the story and the development, to know your heart and your feelings about it.
Yeah, and I acknowledge that I'm in the minority here. I mean, most people love this game. Love this game. 10 out. It consistently. We'll talk about this in a minute. Got 10 out of 10s across the board, and 9 out of 10s too. Yeah, but we'll get into it. The one thing that I wanted to say up front is that two of my favorite reviewers of all time have reviewed this game. Well, I guess they're technically three. Noah Caldwell-Gervais on YouTube reviewed this, and the boys at Watch Out for Fireballs reviewed this too. And they have very, very different, like, polar opposite opinions on this. I will say, I recommend everybody check out the Watch Out for Fireballs episode on this. Partly because I think it's a great show, but also because I think they're at their best on that episode. Like, they do a really well done job. And, you know, you and I and Vince and folks that do this thing, you know, we're all amateurs in a certain light. And when I listen to reviewers and people smarter than me critique stuff, it's a way of increasing my vocabulary and increasing my, like, toolkit. You know what I mean? So, like, a lot of the times in that episode, they would mention something and I would say, I totally agree with that, but I didn't necessarily have the verbiage to describe it. You know what I mean? And that's not to say that my entire opinions on this are going to be a copy paste of WAF's, because it's not. Like, I don't think I felt quite as strongly about it as they did. But all this to say, like, I definitely learn a lot from them. So I will probably cite them often in this episode, or at least where applicable. So I did want to get that caveat out of the way. So if you're a fan of both us and them, one, thank you, because that's flattering. But two, I'm not just copy pasting others' opinions. I'm just doing my best to learn from people that I admire and respect.
I'm very curious about the story that didn't connect for you. Now, I will say there were a lot of moments where I was confused with the story. And I haven't listened to anybody else's opinions on it, but I did call Brian Durazio as soon as I finished this game, because I was like, what happened to me? What has happened? Like, I knew what happened, but I didn't know what was happening. And Brian, being the Brian that he is, in his very Brian-ly way, and he's kind of a mega fan. He will play Bioshock every year. Like, it is his annual game. It is what he does. And he kind of helped me tie up some of the things that I didn't understand, which I don't know if the game makes as clear as it did in the first Bioshock. Like, some of the story, like some of the jumble that you talk about, I feel like is aided greatly in part by what Brian told me. I'm going to say Brian's name just 2 more times, Brian, and we will move on from Brian. That's 3. Sorry, everybody. But I'm curious to know, did you listen to their review of the game when you were partway through, 3/4 of the way through? When did you listen to their opinions?
So I listened to them and to Noah and to a few others on YouTube. I listened to them and to Noah Caldwell-Gervais the most. I listened to their episode on this before we even talked about playing it. And it was one of those things like this happens to me with books too. Like, I'll listen to something or I'll read something, and then like a week later, I'll remember that I liked it and I'll remember parts of it, but I don't remember like every detail. You know, and this happens to me with games, and this is why I take notes whenever we do this stuff. And I don't know, I've heard that happens to other people. I've heard that's a very normal thing, especially with books, to like just forget it.
Too.
Yeah.
I forget shit all the time. I remember how I feel, though, you know?
It was just the other day. I was like, honey, where did I put my keys? And then I remembered I don't have a wife. So what the hell?
And I also don't have a house or a car, and I was standing alone in the middle of a desert.
I'm in desperate need of help. This is no longer a podcast. This is a call for help.
Help us.
But yeah, I listened to it a while ago, and then I re-listened to it as I was approaching the end of the game, just to kind of see if they, like, I mean, obviously they would catch stuff that I don't because they're better at this than I am. But just to say, like, oh yeah, I agree with that. I don't agree with that. That's an interesting observation, like that kind of thing, you know?
See, I can't listen to anything until I'm done with it. Like, I can't. I can watch playthroughs sometimes. Like if I'm in a pinch and I just need some reminders, like with Firewatch, for example. I'd played that game in October, and no matter what you do, the same thing's going to happen, more or less, or is it? That's a great question, because I actually know things do change every time. Even so, you follow a pretty generic path, and so watching that was fine, but I can't listen to other people's opinions too much. Like even, okay, another name here, my coworker and darling friend Noah Brown, he had told me many times, and I kind of had to tune him out. I had to try my hardest to tune him out, which was, he was like, yeah, Bioshock Infinite, it's going to be better to you than Bioshock 1. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, it's better. And I was like, I don't know if I can just believe that, because, it's all subjective, right? So I try to push it all away from me so I can, but I understand also wanting to study it alongside learning it, that makes, studying alongside playing, excuse me.
For sure. I definitely will say I liked 1 infinitely more. Did you catch that?
Sorry.
Did you catch that? Do you know why that's funny? No, I liked it much more. From what I've heard, I would probably like 2 more than 1, but again, I'll have to play it first. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm sitting with all this.
Well, I'm sitting in a place where I'm very angry at you, and I'm going to be really grumpy the rest of this episode.
That's the Ben that I know.
I'm grumpy.
Do you want to talk? Do you want to talk a little bit about development stuff and like just facts and figures?
Oh, I guess we can. So with Bioshock Infinite, it was developed by Irrational Games and eventually published by 2K Games. Just, not unlike its predecessors. Ken Levine, which I didn't know this, Brian, I said his name again. Brian informed me that Ken Levine, not Adam Levine, but Ken Levine, was the voice of one of the sales machines in the game, as well as the Circus of Value. That's Ken Levine's voice.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I don't think I knew that either.
It's a Circus of Value. That was him. But basically, I don't want to sound like I'm copying and pasting everything from the last episode, but more or less, it's, in terms of development, it's pretty parallel when it comes to all that jazz, but
it's not quite parallel. This went through an excessive amount of development hell, where like things were being developed and it took a long time. Ideas were consistently and constantly scrapped, and people were replaced. So it was in development for a long time, and in fact, the initial, I don't know if you want to call it a preview or a trailer or what, but the initial thing that they showed was a very different game, right? So it was, it was Columbia, but it was dilapidated and like destroyed. But they ultimately scrapped that because they thought it would be too similar to Rapture, as if that's a bad thing. But yeah, this went through a lot of like changing of hands and stuff like that. And I think when it comes to the narrative and just the general story elements and some of the character designs, I think that shows up like plain as day. And that's why
that's fair.
That's why things for me, they were incoherent with each other. There was dissonance there, but we'll talk about that.
Yeah, I guess when I said parallel earlier, it's kind of foundationally at the beginning, right? It's similar, but no, it's definitely gone through some changing of hands. Ultimately, it was released worldwide in March of 2013 on PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, which I actually, I did have a PlayStation, or listen to me, I did have an Xbox 360 at that time, but I had no desire to play Bioshock Infinite, nor did I have any desire to play Bioshock the first. So I'm a little late to the party with all of this. But yeah, so that was development and release, and there was a follow-up to Bioshock Infinite that came out eventually, which we're not talking about today. But it has bundled itself as Bioshock Infinite, the Complete Edition, and it features Clash in the Clouds, which I know nothing about, and Burial at Sea, which is in 2 parts, and that was released in 2014. So, and I don't know if you would consider this a cash grab necessarily, but from what I've heard, it was more of a means to tie everything together. I can't speak to that yet. Someday I'll be able to. Someday I'll jump through a tear and I'll come back and I'll tell myself exactly what it was, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, what else? There was another thing that I wanted to touch on super quick. Oh, right. The game largely got critical praise across the board. Consistent 8, 9, and even 10 out of 10s. It made several Game of the Year lists, things like that. Just like Bioshock 1 and I believe 2, it runs on a heavily modified Unreal Engine. This one being 3, I think.
Yes, I believe you're right.
Yeah, so it plays similarly, but now we can kind of intersperse some other development facts in hither and yon while we go through this. But why don't we talk a little bit about like how it plays and how it looks and just how the game exists in the hands of the player.
Before we do, would you like me to mention some sales numbers since we're talking reception?
Oh, sure.
Hi, everybody. It's me, Ben by the Numbers, which was not my title, and actually I generally don't care for numbers, and people say musicians are supposed to like numbers. Well, guess what, pal? Anyway. In the United States, Bioshock was, get this, the top-selling console game in March of 2013, 878,000 units sold, which is pretty astronomical by a lot of measures. I think 3.7 million copies were shipped by May of 2013. So, I mean, it took off like wildfire. But again, after Rapture shows what it is, and Bioshock 2 comes along, which I understand was kind of a placeholder. It helped them realize. I that's what I'd been told, is that Bioshock 2 helped. You can see that they were trying to get to Infinite. But they, as you've clearly laid out, they weren't really getting there just yet. But this game clearly was just packed with gunpowder from a sales standpoint because of the amount of potential that was just bursting forth from it, from how well the first Bioshock did. So yeah, it kind of took over the world in the year 2013 by comparison to a lot of its colleague games, as it were.
Yeah, this game was billed as being like capital I important, like a AAA capital I important kind of game. And I don't remember if either of us mentioned this, but Ken Levine actually, he was the creative director or whatever his title was on Bioshock 1. He did not take that role for Bioshock 2, so as to work on Infinite. This was supposed to be sort of his baby, so to speak. And he did, for better or for worse, as we'll get to, interject a lot of his ideas on things into the mix. So did he accomplish what he set out to? Yeah, but as with all art, once it is in the public sphere, the artist doesn't really get a lot to say about what people think about it. So, and again, I'm in the minority. I understand that. So, I get it.
So, you mentioned wanting to talk about how the game plays. So, why don't you lead us to battle here, pal?
Sure. So, this is just like Bioshock 1. It's a first-person shooter. This one is more of a corridor shooter than Bioshock 1. What we mean by that is there's less exploration than before, but it plays similarly. The gunplay has changed. Instead of holding multiple weapons on a weapon wheel, you only get two at a time that you can swap out at any time by finding them. You can't buy guns in this one. So that was the first change. You still have plasmids, but they're kind of renamed vigors. And you still have, what was the plasmids? Eve, except it was renamed salts for this one.
Like bath salts, but you don't eat any faces off of anyone.
Yeah, I'm not sure why they called them salts. I got the impression that he was drinking them every time he took them. That's what it looked like.
I'm not entirely sure, unless, Eve, which is what, found at the bottom of the ocean, if that was like a code name for it beforehand. I can't speak to that, but you know who can? Brian.
Classic Brian. What else? What else with this game? They introduced a new protagonist, or not a new protagonist. Well, they did introduce a new protagonist, but they introduced a companion in the form of Elizabeth. She doesn't actually fight. She'll toss you stuff during the battle, like health, salts, ammo, things like that. And then toss you coins outside of battle, too. Some money.
She once tossed a ferret at me, and it clawed my face.
Well, that's a feature, not a bug.
Right. No, it definitely wasn't a bug. It was definitely a mammal.
Ha-cha-cha-cha-cha-cha.
Ha-cha-cha-cha-cha. I thought it was kind of nice that they went to 2 guns, because that's something I noticed became very popular as games continued in the teens, is that you see this in Zelda, you see this in a few other games, I think, where they kind of give you a little bit more limits. You know, you only have 2 guns now. You can't carry an entire arsenal on you at all times, unless you're in Skyrim, and then you just get too heavy to move.
See, I recognize that trend, but I didn't like it. I thought it took away some of the creativity with dealing with enemies. And particularly in this game, the enemies are spongier. So like they're not more difficult. They just take more bullets. So it would have been nice to have a little more creativity with how to deal with them, because one thing in Bioshock 1 that I enjoyed doing quite a lot was hacking turrets and hacking security cameras. They took that away. Hacking just doesn't exist here. There is a lockpicking quote-unquote mechanic, but it is strictly a point and click. Elizabeth handles all the lockpicking. And it's not pass or fail. Well, it is pass or fail, but it just depends on whether you have lockpicks or not.
You see, and you say about creativity with the firearms, and I'll give you that. Having less firearms certainly does, it kind of pushes to the side some of your creativity, but it forces you, I think, to up your versatility. And while you say that the enemies are more spongy, I don't know why. I must have died 150 times playing the first Bioshock. In this game, didn't have as hard of a time, but perhaps that was because I upgraded the right guns at the right time. IDK.
Well, I think this game starts out significantly easier than Bioshock 1, for sure. Towards the end, especially like the final battle, it's just, they introduce so often just these wave battles of enemies, but it's consistently the same enemies, and they're not difficult to beat. They just take bullets, and that's it. And generally, the environments they're not conducive to creative play. It's just run and gun, you know? And I guess that brings us to the Vigors, too. How did you feel about the Vigors compared to the Plasmids?
I appreciate you asking me, Richard. I didn't... There were a lot of Vigors I liked, like crows. I mean, it was really just a theme and variation on bees. Bees has to have a question mark because of whatever that card game is that everyone just lost their minds over around 2014. Cards Against Humanity, that's it.
But also because of Nicolas Cage.
Bees? Oh, no.
The bees! Oh, my eyes! My eyes!
God bless him. I think he's in the Coppola film dynasty. But anyway, I digress. Yeah, so I didn't mind the salts. I will say that I felt that from a control standpoint, just to kind of bind in vigors with the controls, I felt like it was a little bit better in the first Bioshock. Like the controls actually seemed to switch, and I could be wrong. I could have lost my mind, but some of the buttons to jump, squat, etc. Were different on my controller. Again, I could be losing my mind. We didn't get that awesome running speed the entire time either, which I know we're talking vigors, but I liked the pace of the running in the first Bioshock more than in this game. But what were your thoughts on vigors versus plasmids?
I largely agree with you completely. I liked them in the first Bioshock more. In this one, I felt like you get, is it a total of 8, I think?
I think there's 8.
8 vigors or something. I mainly really only use the crows and the electricity shock jockey. So a lot of the vigors either aren't useful or just do the same thing. Like crows and bucking bronco, for all intents and purposes, do the same thing, right? They just hold enemies still. It's just one's in the air, one's on the ground. And then Return to Sender, I couldn't use it to save my life. I mean, it had so few uses because, like, in this game, like we said, you're running and gunning so much that, like, you can't stop to, like, catch bullets and throw them back.
No, and there were a few moments in the game where, whenever you're playing like a Zelda game, and I know I mentioned Zelda a lot, but let's be honest, Zelda is just that in the video game industry. It's a stalwart. It's been there forever. It's a reference point. You'll get the hook shot at a temple, and you will have to use the hook shot at every temple following, or maybe not until like the final temple. You have to use things randomly. You don't know. With Kraken, for example, which is one of the salts, they only really ask you to use it one time in the whole game, which is like fine. I don't disrespect that, but when we're talking about creative play, I don't feel a sense of like ownership like I did with the plasmids in Bioshock necessarily. You know what I mean?
Yeah. They generally ask you in this one to basically use any given vigor in the scene after you get it, right? So I think battering ram, I used that literally once because you kind of had to get onto an adjacent ship or dirigible or whatever to take down an enemy. And that's it. And same with Kraken. I think I used it once on a fireman, but after that, it just doesn't have a ton of usefulness. It's a cool idea, which is, I feel like this game is just full of like, they have their jelly beans that each represent an idea they think is cool, and they just throw it into a jar, and they say, here you go. Variety is the spice of life. And it's like, yeah, I guess, but, I don't, or it's like taking a bite out of your appetizer, entree, and dessert all at the same time. All good individually, but together, I don't want this.
I didn't feel desperate to use the salts. In the first Bioshock, I very much felt like, oh man, okay, I need to try fire in this situation. Well, maybe it's because I died so damn much. But I felt like, okay, I need to use the flame. I need to use the lightning plasmid. Okay, I need to use bees. I need to use et cetera and so forth. In this game, it was like, well, this is just kind of gravy, which is not, I'm not knocking the game because, my rating is based on its playability. So I am certain that there are people in this world who look at this game, know exactly how to squeeze every single solitary milliliter out of the sponge. But for me, I didn't feel compelled to do that.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. One thing that I don't think we mentioned, in addition to changing the guns, they also gave you a shield, which wasn't present in the first one. It's really identical to Halo. It's the same thing. The shield will recharge. You can take a couple hits whenever you've got the shield up, and then it starts to deplete your health. But yeah, largely the same. And they're all, and by they I mean health, shield, and salts/vigors. They're all upgradable throughout the experience via little potions that you find.
Mm-hmm.
Does that about cover it in terms of just play? Are we missing anything?
I know we mentioned that you sprint in this game, which I will say this right now. Your general walking pace, your maximum, like if you're full stick forward in Bioshock, is the perfect speed for me. I loved it. This game, you either are like kind of at like a power walk, like I'm trying to get through Disney World as fast as I can walk, or you are like sprinting and there's no in between. And that's fine and everything, but like, I just, if there's a good single speed, it's a good single speed. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah. I guess I didn't notice it to a point where it frustrated me, but I know exactly what you mean. Fortunately, there's not a lot of times in this where you're following Elizabeth, and generally when you are, she will default to your exact speed, so it doesn't have that Skyrim problem of like the accompany quest where the NPC walks a little bit slower than you, or a little bit faster than you, but you run faster than they walk. Or vice versa. I don't know. You know what I mean?
She's a goddamn marathon runner, though. Like, if you want to sprint, she's like, oh, you're sprinting, and she'll just stay in front of you at the same pace. I mean, like, if Homegirl went out for the Olympics, no one would win. Just her. Just saying.
Yeah, I mean, she is basically a god, so I think she'd do pretty well at the Olympics.
Goddamn monster is what she is.
Also, just speaking about the game in general, the visuals, I mean, it's a good-looking game. It's very much a good-looking game. It still has that uncanny quality to the human people in Bioshock, and you get that a lot in here. There's a scene at the beach where if you get too close to the human model's feet, that they look like unholy abominations, like just real. I think I sent you a Snapchat about it, actually. Like the feet just look so gross and weird. And, you know, it's Bioshock 1 and 2, you're not up near and next to people all that often, so you never notice it. But here you kind of do. Like everybody kind of has like sullen, lifeless eyes. But the environment is really, really good. It looks really pretty. Like Columbia is a really pleasant experience in terms of just looking at it. Everywhere looks good. Like it's a good looking game.
I would agree with that. And I will just briefly say, be careful if you Google Bioshock feet. You'll get some really interesting material and content. But yes, no, I did see a picture of the foot that Rick was talking about, and I went, oh yeah, that's a bad foot.
I think we just found our new podcast.
Uh-oh, Biofeet.
We Google, each week we Google feet plus a new word. The results may shock you.
Ugh. No, I would agree. I think it was gorgeous. I thought the game was just beautiful, and that it was, in a sense, an improvement upon the first Bioshock to at least that end. But I also haven't played Bioshock Remastered on my computer yet. So when I revisit...
Oh, interesting.
When I revisit the briny depths, I am excited.
I mean, I definitely liked I liked Rapture more than I liked Columbia. But
same.
I don't think Rapture looked just objectively less good. That's interesting. Right. You're gonna like it playing the remastered version.
I'm kind of sweating already, but I think that's because we have a detached air duct in this room.
I'm just perpetually sweating, so I understand completely.
That's all right. You'll be fine.
It's to the point, Ben, like, you know, I'm a big fan of hot sauces. If I eat something particularly spicy, like since I'm bald, I feel the pores on my head just opening up, and I can feel the sweat. This podcast has been Rick's Weird and Gross Body, brought to you by my Weird and Gross Body.
No, your body is lovely. I've hugged it so many times and pancake bellied it, which is not for any of you to concern yourselves with. Yeah, we've had some good times together, buddy.
Yeah, pre-pandemic, we definitely did do a lot of hugging. Speaking of hugging and things that I know you and I both like to do, and things that we both enjoy, what did you think about the music? That's what I wanted to ask you about.
Okay. So can I mention a few songs by name here?
I was hoping you would, because I've got a couple I wanted to.
Okay, so we will obviously talk about Will a Circle Be Unbroken a few times. So I just want to say, and I'm not trying to jump ahead, I'll talk about the music. I won't talk about when we hear it necessarily, because that comes with the story, and that's what makes it important. There was a lot of original composition for the game by Gary Shyman, unless that's Skyman and I've somehow said it wrong. But there was a lot of original music for it, unlike the first Bioshock, which was a number of popular pieces of music that they stitched into the game. Not that there aren't a number of popular pieces stitched into this game, because very quickly in the game, we encounter an arrangement of, and I know we'll cross this bridge when we get to it, but God Only Knows by the Beach Boys being sung by a barber. I love
that so much. That was so good.
By a barbershop quartet, for God's sake.
Did you, fun fact that I learned, they were originally, did you see how they had like bees on their,
I did.
That was originally going to be a call out to The Simpsons, from the episode where Homer was in a quartet called the Bee Sharps.
Of course.
But I don't know why they took it away. But I love that episode of this. It's really funny. But yeah, that arrangement is really, it might be my second, or it's either second or first favorite arrangement in this game. For sure.
It was real taste.
Sorry, the other one that I really liked was the blues version of Tainted Love.
I missed that.
Oh, dude, it's so good. It's tucked away in this bar. I don't think it's mandatory to go in there, but it's really, really good.
the piece of music that really kind of struck me, and I was like listening, and I said, the hell is this? It was Carousel. It was 3/4 Time. It was Girls Just Want to Have Fun.
Yeah.
I was like, you're shitting me. Like we're just sitting there going like, is this Girls Just Want to Have Fun? And like timely placed in the game, which we'll get to. But I didn't think I'd hear da 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 da. You know, it was really clunky, and it was very well stitched in. But it plays into some of the story of the game, I think, in terms of tears. But anyhow,
it definitely does. Like all of this anachronistic music, there are a lot of anachronisms that we get to see in here, and it's pretty cool. Yeah, I'm glad that you liked that as much as I did. I definitely that was a cool part of the game for me.
It was kind of goofy, but they did a great job with it.
Yeah. I think that's about all in terms of just how the game exists. We didn't talk about the themes. And there are a couple, but I think we can maybe talk about those as we get to them in the story, right, Ben?
I think the themes kind of lend themselves to, really falling into place at their, at the appropriate time. At the appointed time. That's it.
Sure. Yeah. Do you want to dive into the story?
I think so. Good? I think we are good. I guess I'll just kind of put a bow on this section by saying it did win a number of awards with its reviews. It was a highly celebrated game. And one can see why, but again, you're entitled to your own subjective opinion on this game. So
if you don't know Ben, that was Ben's very polite way of saying that, Rick, I don't know why you think the way that you do.
It was not such, but I have this thing, everybody. It's this, I don't want to call it a problem, but it's called empathy. And God. Okay. No, I'm saying that like when you communicate an idea or like a feeling to me, Rick, I put myself into your perspective so that I can understand why you felt like parts of it were jumbled, which is not me saying that you or Vince are void of empathy, because you're both beautifully empathic. But that's what I'm saying, is that like I'm sensing like some of the disconnect for you. But yeah, it might have won awards, but that doesn't mean that it's award winning to everyone, is what I'm ultimately just trying to say.
Fair enough, Ben. Fair enough. Do you want to kick us off into the story?
Yeah, I would be happy to do so. So our game begins not too differently than the first game, actually. Instead of a plane crash, we kind of are, I don't want to say plunged, but we're more or less on this boat through the ocean. It's kind of confusing. We see this lighthouse in front of us, and while we're, being forced towards this lighthouse, what we end up hearing are these two voices speaking. It's very strange. So the two, they're really just lady and gentleman, and they're having this kind of bickersome conversation as we're coming towards this lighthouse. And, again, it looks like the beginning of the first game, and they're, just, again, bickering, and it does seem like a dreadful place to be stranded. Well, maybe there's someone inside, and they're just, your character, Booker DeWitt, is saying, excuse me, like what's going on here? And they're just kind of like, whatever about him. And he goes up to the lighthouse, and there is a little note on the door. And Richard, what does that note say?
Oh, that note says, DeWitt, bring us the girl and wipe away the debt. That this game really loves the girl, really does not love the debt.
Who loves the debt? But you sit there and you're going, I don't know about you, Rick, but like, unless I missed something, I was sitting there going, what the hell is this game talking about? You know, we were just literally dropped off at a lighthouse, and then those two bozos left us at the lighthouse with their, they just kind of rode away into the distance, and you're sitting there going, what am I supposed to do now? Yeah, they didn't care. So we're going through this lighthouse, and at the bottom floor, we're seeing a lot of evangelical, old, early 1900s sort of stitchings and statements, and I think there's a baptismal font at the bottom of the lighthouse as well, is there not?
Yes.
And we're hearing, what's the song that's playing in the lighthouse? Oh, it's one of my favorite ones. No, there's a spiritual. I'm going to find it, but if you'd care to continue, Rick, I'm going to find out what spiritual it is.
Sure. So you're on the third floor of the lighthouse. There is a shot dead man tied to a chair with a bag over his head, and there's a note saying, "Don't disappoint us." So shit's getting real pretty quickly. At the top of the lighthouse, you do a puzzle, and I say that in quotes because the puzzle key was handed to you by the two twins on the boat, who we'll later learn are the Latouche twins. And it has the answer right on it. And when you get there, Booker holds it up, shows it to the viewer, the player, and says, huh, or something along those lines. So it's not really a puzzle. But anywho's, you put it in, and the sky begins to flash red, and there are sirens. A chair pops up in the middle of the room, and as creepy and scary as that is, you just sit down in it. And the chair
like any normal human.
Yeah, totally exactly what anyone would do. So the chair holds you down, shakes your gun out of your possession, then just shoots you up into the sky. And that's when we see the floating city of Columbia, very intentionally made to look like heaven.
And I, for the life of me, cannot figure out what the spiritual is. It'll come to me partway through. It will come to me partway through. But not unlike our entrance into Rapture in the first Bioshock, we're kind of gliding, and it's this extremely Elysian, beautiful glimpse of this city in the sky. And we're drifting, we're floating, and we find ourselves landing on this, into this sort of, it's similar to the bathysphere. I don't know really what to call it, but it's I guess it's a welcome center of some sort.
It's Bioshock loves to do this. I've found they put you in a receptacle, either an elevator or something like this, so they can do some world building, like as you as the player looking out of whatever receptacle you're in. So like you're seeing Rapture and Columbia through the bathysphere or this chair rocket. As you're floating down in the chair rocket outside the window, you see like propaganda messages about a man named Comstock, the prophet, who is leading all to Eden.
He is, and there are, whenever we exit our vessel, our rocket, whatever we want to call it, which I do love that. I do love the fact that they give you the free, you can look anywhere and see anything you want in the sky at that point. But whenever we disembark, we hear this a cappella music playing way off in the distance, and it is "Will the Circle Be Unbroken," which is a gospel hymn. It's from 1907, and if I'm not mistaken, this game is 1912. Is it not, or is it 1908? I can't remember.
It's 1912.
Okay, I thought it was 1912, but it's it was a very popular hymn at the time, and it's still kind of popular now. It's a little bit more of a folky tune, but I'm just going to stop before I get ahead of myself, because if you know me in sacred music, I'm just going to go crazy. But we hear it.
Do you like sacred music?
No, I just spent years playing the organ for my health.
A mighty fortress is our Ben, everybody.
Oh no, I am not worthy of such a title. But we hear "Will the Circle Be Unbroken" playing in the distance, and it's kind of eerie because it's a cappella. There are some voxophones, which are different than the what we get in Bioshock the first, and they have similar recorded messages about history, and we see all of these statues and stained glass of not just the prophet, but the prophet's loved one. And some of it seems to be a memorial, and some of it seems to be a tribute to the living. So we're kind of navigating ourselves through this section. And let me point out also, the ground is all water. So we're kind of sludging through water, and there are some men in white robes standing around. And yeah, we're navigating this new, glorious, luminous setting in the game. And it's very, very stunning.
Yeah, and you're trying to get into the city. You eventually stumble across a sermon with a group of religious devotees. And it sounds like the sermon is about the prophet Comstock. The only way that you can actually get into the city is to accept the baptism. And they say the same thing to you that they say in Bioshock 1. I don't remember exactly. It's like, is that someone new or something like that? I don't. It's the same phrase.
I'm going to find it, and then you're going to be sorry. That's a joke. You won't be sorry. We're on the same team. Damn it. Is it someone new? Someone from Sodom, from the Sodom below, of course, because we hear Sodom a lot. Newly come to Columbia to be washed clean before our prophet, our founders, our Lord? Bees?
Yeah. Bees? Yeah, the first part is the same as Bioshock 1. But they comment that you don't look clean, and they hold you underwater even more as they baptize you, and you black out, which is a very aggressive baptism, as far as I understand baptisms. You don't generally drown the baby, do you?
No.
Does it depend which denomination?
I was just going to say, depending on the denomination, some of them can feel a lot closer to being drowned. I'm not knocking anyone's beliefs, but I'm saying that there are some denominations where you are submerged. Your whole body and your head and everything is just right in. Now, in Presbyterian land in which I grew up, Bert was his name, gets a little water. In the name of the Father, the water, Son, water, Holy Spirit. That was it. Nothing like that. But actually, quick little aside, the first church that I ever was employed at was a Baptist church. Okay? And this was at the ripe old age of 19. Okay? And I wasn't quite liturgically up to code yet with my language and with my word choice. So I was exploring the church as I had just been employed there. And the Baptists, when they baptize, it is a submersion of the body. So I was kind of crawling around the back of this church, and I said, "Look, Mom, I found the dunk tank." So yes, it does depend on the denomination, and you are not, it is what it is. So anyhow, yes, you are baptized, and then you have this disturbing vision, don't you, Richard?
Yeah, you black out, and you sort of have this dream of you sitting at a desk. You're looking at, ID of yourself, some gambling slips, and bottles of liquor. There's a guy pounding the door, and he's asking about the girl and the debt, because he needs the girl, and you don't need the debt. So that is hammered over and over again as this goes. Opening the door reveals a city being destroyed by a blimp with cannons and guns.
I think it's New York City at that.
I thought it was, but I'm never confident with IDing cities.
Chrysler Building, I think I saw, and the Empire State. So it's another era of New York, but it is. Yeah,
but it's just a dream, sort of. But when you come to, you're surrounded by statues of the founding fathers. Washington, Jefferson, and Franklin, I believe.
Yep.
And they're very much deified. So I guess Bioshock was kind of prescient in that sense. Because now in 2020 and 2021, what good old patriot doesn't love the founding fathers, am I right? That's maybe a conversation for a different game. But yeah, you still have to find, you're still looking for the statue/city of Columbia.
So while we're around all of these founding fathers and these kind of eternally displayed in an ivory stone, probably in marble, IDK, there are a number of people in robes, and I believe it's both men and women who are, praying, so forth. And eventually we find ourselves to a door that leads us into what is the actual Columbia. So we've left this group of praying people, and we kind of open the door, and there before us is this beautiful city in the sky, of Colombia. So, I mean, it really kind of teases us and builds up what this city is actually going to look like with our feet on the ground. And they do a great job with like forcing your perspectives and like what's big and what isn't. I mean, they really make everything just grandiose.
Yeah, it really is visually, I mean, maybe stunning is a bit strong of a word, but it does look very good. I cannot fault the game on that.
They do well. I guess whenever I say stunning, I mean like the light effect. Like they really make it like, you know, bright compared to what we've seen.
A literal stunning, yes.
Yes. No, I meant in the, yeah.
Yeah, so there's a parade that's going by that sort of gives you the mythos of what's going on. Comstock won a battle at Wounded Knee, and the Angel of Columbia came to him. He led everyone out of Sodom and into Eden, but it is his child, the Lamb, who will be the real savior. I have written down it is his son, the Lamb. I think that might have just been... I think I just assumed. I don't think that's correct, but yeah, the Lamb will be the savior. Sorry, what?
Mm-hmm. No, I was just gonna say we would all assume because that's what we've been, you know, kind of told within the sect of Christianity. You know what I mean? So like, I thought it was a son too.
Yeah, that's fair, and that has that's a problem in and of itself, but not a problem that the game wants to tackle. And this is where we get our first anachronism of God Only Knows by the Beach Boys being sung as a barbershop quartet. Like we said before, it's really good. I mean, it really is really good. But if you're an astute player, you might be thinking, well, this is 1912. I don't think the Beach Boys were around in 1912. What's going on? And that gets revealed slowly throughout the story.
Yes, it does. It's also worth mentioning that early on at this point, there are these little, I'm not sure what to call them, they're kinetoscopes. That's what I'm looking for, which you can get little visions of the prophet and like what the prophet has done and other things that have happened around the town, but it's all propaganda. And speaking of propaganda, whilst traversing the streets of Colombia, we notice that there are posters everywhere warning of the false shepherd who seeks only to lead our lamb astray. So again, the lamb keeps getting mentioned, and as Rick mentioned, he thought it was the son, which I did too. And there's posters around saying the mark of the false shepherd will be, and there's like this mark on the back of the hand, which early on in the game, if you're paying attention, the back of your hand is the same as the mark of the false shepherd.
Well, it's so comical because like you walk up to it and it says exactly as you said, beware the mark of the false shepherd, AD on the back of his hand. And Booker raises his hand, sees that he's got that, and he just goes, I have that. And then he doesn't like put a glove on, he doesn't put his hand in his pockets, he just keeps going. Like it's the literal version of the Garfield meme where Garfield sees a picture of himself with it crossed out in a circle and he goes, I wonder who that's for.
Yeah,
it's the same thing. A couple other things.
He says what the? He says what the? Which isn't much better.
I gotcha.
It's not much better
because he doesn't do anything about it or even question it. Really, aside from that. There are a couple of things before that scene, because directly after that is the infamous Lotto scene, which we'll get to. But prior to that, some things that you'll find. This game is exclusively based on an autosave feature, which I do not like at all. Autosaving is good, but not as a sole way of saving your progress. Right? It works in conjunction with quick saving and other things. You can walk through the fair, which is pretty cool. You'll see this is where you're introduced to Vigors, which I want to talk about in a second here with you, Ben. You're introduced to this game's version of the Big Daddy. It's called the Handyman, which is essentially when older men sort of are losing their body capabilities, they're put onto this mechanical suit, and it's supposed to be sort of like a husband replacement thing. So it's a giant metal body with your brain and organs grafted to it to do like household tasks and stuff like that. So it doesn't make sense that we fight these eventually, but that is what it is. Circling back to the Vigors, one thing that I kept asking myself throughout this is like, why do these exist in this universe?
The Vigors?
right? Like Rapture, yeah, Rapture, it made total sense because like the plasmids were a way to, well, they came out of the abuse of Adam, and then they were used to exploit the system that Andrew Ryan set up that had to be exploited for people to survive, right? So plasmids made all the sense in the world. I can't figure out why Vigors need to exist in this universe other than video game Bioshock reasons, you know? Like, this is supposed to be a quote-unquote paradise. I mean, we'll get to why it's not really, but, like, for the people living there, it's a paradise. For the white people living there, it's a paradise. So why do they need the ability to, like, shoot electric bolts from their fingers?
That's a great question, and perhaps, it was kind of displayed when you're going through the city of Columbia. I think it's past the parade, whenever we're introduced to salts and everything, and we see all this stuff. There are a lot of displays as to what you can do with them. At least that's what the impression I was getting. So it seemed to me like it was more of a, if you can afford this, or like, why, since you're here, you deserve this kind of superpower of sorts. Like, because it really is just that. It is, I can shoot fire from my fingertips, or I can do, that it kind of came off like it was a display, like at the fair.
I just don't think it's not a strong foundation, especially like this same studio did the plasmid deal in Bioshock 1. That was a strong, like, reason, a strong, diegetic reason for plasmids to exist. Here, I mean, it just feels like they were like, we want them in and we'll think about why after. You know what I mean? But
you mean because like sorry, go ahead.
No, after you.
I was going to say like the plasmids were something that you could afford if you were of the echelon to get into Rapture?
No, quite the opposite. Like, plasmids became rampant because people were abusing Adam, and people were using like the hacking plasmid to like hack into shit, to like steal shit. They were using the plasmids to hurt other people, to take Adam from them. Whereas here it's just like, yeah, you can buy them. And like the display for Incinerate, for example, or it's not called Incinerate, but you shoot fire. You're shooting fire at the devil.
Devil's kiss, yeah.
When are you going to need that? When are you going to ever fight the devil? You know?
Again, I think it's just a glorified, like, I don't want to say it's like a Peloton, because if you have a Peloton, it's fine. But like, it's kind of like, look at this thing I have.
Yeah, it's one of those things where like the more video games I play and the more smart people I listen to, it's just like when something exists in a video game strictly because like video game reasons, I'm just tired of that. Like, anyway,
It can feel like it's shoehorning in.
For sure.
Yeah.
Before we have the AD scene, we come across the Latouche twins once more, and they're asking us to flip a coin. Booker doesn't really want to do that, but you do it anyway, and it comes up as heads, and you can see his name Robert, I think. Robert Latouche is holding a chalkboard tallying how many heads or tails, and it's all heads. And he says, I never find it quite as satisfying when it comes out this way. This, at first, it seems off, but we'll learn exactly what this is hinting towards a little later.
Absolutely. And they're wearing, because it's 1912, the chalkboards are in the form of a sandwich board, because of course it is.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's right. They're wearing it as like a suit, practically.
Yeah, so we've got Robert Lutece, I think, and then what's...
Rosa.
We don't yet learn her name.
We don't learn it.
We learn that later.
Yeah. This brings us to the very infamous scene that this game chose to use, the lottery scene.
The raffle square, right?
Yes, the raffle.
Which involves lottery balls, of course.
Yeah, so you walk towards the front, and it turns out you have the winning ticket, because it really can't happen any other way. And you... Literally. And you get the prize, which is he hands you a baseball, and before a curtain opens up on the stage, he gets an assistant, the Carney Master does, to come and pull the curtain open, and he comments, ain't she the prettiest white girl you've ever seen? And at this point, you might be like, that's weird. And then you notice, actually everybody in Columbia is white. That's weird. And then the curtain opens and you see a tied up / shackled up interracial couple, a white man and a black woman, being kind of pushed forward on stage behind some incredibly racist imagery, like watermelon patches and caricatures with unflattering features and things like that. And this is where we learn that Colombia is sort of founded on this very prevalent idea of racism and things like that.
Yes, we do. It's at this point where, of course, again, your number is drawn from the raffle, it's number 77, which is you. And Fink says, number 77, come and claim your prize. First throw. And the crowd's going, first throw, first throw, first throw. And everyone's yelling. And there they are. And they're saying, please don't do this. And then Jeremiah Fink, who is the carnival barker at this point, is, come on, are you going to throw it? Or are you taking your coffee black these days? Ha 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 ha. And at this point, the groom is, let her go, please, I'm the one you want. And you have the choice of either following through on what Fink has set up for you and throwing it at them, or you can choose to throw it at Jeremiah Fink. And I don't know about you, Rick, but I chose to throw it at Jeremiah Fink. And so I would think you did, because I know you.
Yeah, I mean, I could see why people would try either, just to see if the video game would let you, but it comes out to the same outcome either way. I want to talk about this imagery here, because this imagery is prevalent throughout the first half of the game. It's one of the reasons that this game makes me so mad, and why I think it feels so gross to play this in 2021, is that Ken Levine chose to use this imagery, but he ultimately doesn't do anything with it, right? You can't be in morally good standing and choose to use imagery like this as a backdrop, right? Like Ken Levine's famous line, I mean, I'm not going to quote him directly, but his big thing is I wanted to present it in a central way, and it's up to the players to decide. And that is so fucking shitty and just a vile thing to do. How are you going to consciously use this sort of hateful imagery and not make the game about this? Especially in 2021, and 2020, we have literally seen fascists in the streets, right? More than ever now, the issues of race and innocent black folks getting killed by police or by poverty and other adjacent issues, it's never been more prevalent, right? And to play this game now, and I'm sure it was the same then, to a lesser degree, I didn't play it back then, but it feels so disgusting for them to include this stuff and just not do anything with it, and then just say, well, what do you think about Comstock, huh? I don't know. And then they just ultimately abandon it. They never do anything with it. It's this cowardly centrism, this well, maybe both sides have some good and bad to them. It's so morally reprehensible to me.
That's not what I picked up at all with this. I mean, they used racist imagery, 110% they did. I think it was to drive the narrative. I mean, so first of all, it's 1912, which is not me saying, so it's good. That's not what I'm saying. But for him to make that we've got Comstock who is vilifying the black people, which we learn about later on, at least, and Brian actually helped me with part of this too. Thanks again, Brian. I think the fact that the imagery exists and everything we've basically been taught as a society, at least from what I've gathered with Jim Crow and all that jazz surrounding that, I think it's kind of blatant that it's bad. I think that I don't know if it needs to walk me to that conclusion necessarily, which is not to say I don't understand where you're coming from, because it by that measure, you can definitely argue that it aged poorly. For me, yeah, I looked at the imagery and I was like, this is repulsive to me.
Well, if it ended there, then that's fine. Yes, it's morally bad, and I don't think it's inherently racist to use this kind of imagery either, if there's a grand point. But the grand point is, again, this centrist idea, like Ken Levine saying, it's up to the players to decide what is right and what is wrong. And then later, not to jump ahead too much, the other side, Comstock's antithesis and his main enemy is the Vox Populi, Daisy Fitzroy. They are an anti-racist group. And you would think, like, of course, like, the anti-racists are the good guys. But no, the game goes out of its way to comically make the anti-racists bad, or to get you to root against them. And at one point, Booker says the only difference between Comstock and Fitzroy is how you spell the name. And it's that kind of shitty, like, I won't take a side thing that makes me so mad. Is like, how are you going to present the two sides of Comstock, a fascist religious zealot, and Daisy Fitzroy and the Vox Populi, people that are fighting against capital oppression and racism, as being the same thing? Like, how can you do that in a game and say, like, well, it's up to the players to decide, like, who's to say? Like, how can you do that? Like, even in 2013, how could you do that?
See, and I don't think from a racial standpoint there's much to decide. I felt very much like the imagery that they used for Asians and Black Americans and just Black people in general, I thought it was absolutely abhorrent. But I recognize, with more points to the story, why Fitzroy is, I don't want to say display the way that they are. To me, it didn't feel as centrist as much as it felt. It's hard to explain because I'm trying not to give anything away in the story just yet. So it's really kind of waiting around the bend, as it were.
That's okay. I think this might be something that you and I are just not going to see eye to eye on, but for the sake of not spoiling anything to come, do you want to just continue maybe with what happens after you try to throw the ball?
Absolutely. No, I think we're holding the same coin, because you and I are on the same side of pretty much every single issue when it comes to human rights and all that jazz. I think we're in the same page. Because, I mean, if we weren't, Rick, I don't know if we ever would have been able to live together. But that's a whole other can of worms. Yeah. This is a pro-human podcast. You're just allowed to be a human, and that's enough for us. Anyhow, I got something for you, you son of a bitch. And you go to chuck the ball at Fink, and someone catches your arm. It's a cop. And the cop says it's him, as in, like, you're the false shepherd. Because of course you are. Now, where'd you get that brand, boy? Don't you know that makes you the backstabbing snake in the grass false shepherd? And everyone starts screaming false shepherd, and it's getting really messy. And they pull out this, like, strange hook weapon, which I didn't quite understand the hook weapons. Like, is it supposed to, like, is there, like, a religious significance that they tried to stitch into this? IDK, but you get your hands on it, and it's like this crazy handheld drill thing with, like, these notches in it that just, like, really, it's kind of graphic violence at this point. And you basically blow off the face of the police officer, or if you want to use police officers, neutral enough. And then you basically are going around and you start, scaring away the crowd of people, and it's you against the cops now.
Yeah, this is where we encounter our first fireman enemy. They're
hard.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they're super cool as a concept, but they're literally on fire in a suit of armor that is on fire, and they throw fire at you. So they are more difficult to take down for sure. Back to the kinescope thing, inside of a building called the Blue Ribbon, you can view on those some of the background of Colombia. The gist of it is Colombia seceded from the rest of America, and it was largely race related. So it's maybe a bit of a heavy-handed allegory, but it's one that is, I think, familiar to American players that play this game for sure. But you need to go to the Monument Island and find the capital G girl. This is the girl that will wipe away the capital D debt. You run into the literal KKK inside. And I mean, they're not the literal KKK, but they're this universe's version of the KKK.
It's pretty implied, yeah.
Yeah. So you got to take them down. They're called the Order of the Raven. They have like a Raven teleporting ability. And this is kind of where you get that vigor too. It's called the Murder of Crows, which is a really, I mean, that was consistently in my rotation as a crowd control tool. But you get it after taking them all down. But before you do that, they execute a Chinese prisoner in front of you using these crows. Again, pretty graphic.
It absolutely is. It's worth mentioning that along our way through the buildings and traversing everything, we discovered that we can pick up these potions of sorts. I don't think they're salts technically, but you can actually give yourself a shield, health, or salt upgrade for how much you can hold. So, and it is first presented to us by the Lutece lady. Not that the other Lutece isn't far away, but that's kind of worth mentioning that they level you up this sort of way.
Yeah, yep. And some of them will level up just one. Others will give you a choice as to which one to level up. But yeah, Madame Latouche, Rosalind Latouche gives you that first one. Comstock actually eventually talks to you via projection. He says he knows why you came, and he knows all of your sins, and that not all debts can be repaid, and things will end in blood, quote, as they always do. You get onto a Zeppelin after this, and he can be seen in another Zeppelin next to you, saying, "The Lord forgives all things, but I am a prophet, so I don't have to. Amen." I love that line a lot.
That's good.
I think it's very funny. But anyways, at this point, one of the religious followers in your Zeppelin sort of self-immolates herself to torch you and the blimp. So you got to get off of there and get to the monument head.
And you were kind of, Rick mentioned that there are airships known as gondolas, and that's what we're kind of jumping between. And it turns out that our hook gun that we took off of a police officer, I don't know what to call it, like what its Christian name is, but you can jump from air gondola to gondola, and there are also some rails in the sky that we eventually learn we can fly on, but we'll kind of get to that in time. So yeah, it's really a long fight to get to Monument Island. As I just mentioned, that there are rails that you can ride on, and you can land on the ground. This is kind of a control thing. You can either press B, I guess, for whatever controller I was using, the Switch, to land on the ground, or you can assault an enemy on the ground, and it's basically a one-hit KO if they're a weak enough enemy. And that's what we're doing. We're just ascending and ascending and ascending to get to the head of the monument, as Rick said.
Yeah. I didn't have strong feelings about the rail traversal system. It was fine. There was a couple of areas later in the game where it made traveling very confusing for me, but overall, it's fine. But throughout, as you're walking through the monument head, there are scientific notes on Elizabeth, quote, the specimen. She's a literal damsel in distress, locked in a tower, and she's even dressed like Belle from Beauty and the Beast.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah. Never realized.
Yeah. And, I surely that was intentional on their part. But anyways, the lab is like really worse for wear too. And like the notes make it seem like she is very dangerous. We can kind of view her through two-way. I don't know if they're two-way mirrors or recordings or what, but she largely just reads and sings. But we see her open a portal. This is a literal tear into space and time. The one that she opens is of Paris. This becomes a destination she really wants to go to. This is also the second anachronism that we get, so we realize that these tears are both in space and time, because on the movie theater board, there is a marquee for Revenge of the Jedi.
Wait, what? Did I miss this?
Yeah, it's a Star Wars marquee.
Oh my god, I missed it entirely.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It was a neat little thing to see.
I'm looking this up.
You do find her eventually, but she thinks that you're against her, so she kind of starts chucking books at your head. And you tell her... Oh
my god.
Did you find it?
Yeah, well, and that's right. The tear is to Paris in the 80s.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. So, and that kind of hints too at like, how we're hearing, Tainted Love and God Only Knows in 1912. But we'll get to Jeremiah Fink's brother a little bit later. So after you ask her to stop attacking you, Comstock begins to destroy the tower, so you need to get out of there. The tower kind of slowly collapses, And this is where we see our first songbird, which in my notes I consistently wrote stormbird. So if I mix that up, I'll, songbird is kind of like a giant, what would you call it? Like a giant mechanized bird with arms?
That's exactly what I would call it, yeah.
Yeah. You never get to fight songbird, but it looks like it could deal some serious damage, and you get the impression that it's working for Comstock. It's trying to prevent you from taking Elizabeth. You both end up grappling out of the tower before it falls. And Comstock does do some significant damage. It looks like significant damage to Columbia in general. But the tower does crumble. Not totally, but it falls apart. And you both fall into the ocean. And you have another unconscious vision.
Or so you think you fall into the ocean. Because that's what I thought, because you're falling. And we've been plunged into the sky, so certainly we're falling into the Atlantic because the lighthouse was off the coast of Maine. So, naturally that's, what we think. Now, when we land on the beach, Rick, that's another vision of the office, is it not? So we're back in Booker DeWitt's investigator sort of office, and we're heading back towards the door. What is being said to us at this point again? I cannot remember. Because it's the voice yelling to us again.
It's still about bringing the girl to wipe away the debt.
See, I thought so, but I just didn't have that.
But in this one, Elizabeth is there with you.
That's right, she is in the room. But we wake up, eventually, in an area known as Battleship Bay, which, you guessed it, is actually an ocean in the sky, because of course it is. When in Colombia, and that's not me knocking it. I'm not saying that I don't like it. I think it's really cool, actually.
It's kind of a ridiculous idea, an ocean in the sky.
Oh, I mean, it is ridiculous, but also a city underwater. You know what I mean?
Fair. Yeah, fair.
Unless we're talking Star Wars Episode 1, in which case the Gungans got it right. Gosh darn it. I'm
going to cut that out.
No, believe the boss nass. I need it. It gave me a little bit more life. So we're on the beach, and Elizabeth is there, and she's kind of moving ahead of you though. And there are voxophones everywhere that you can pick up, and people are kind of looking at you, and they talk to you. I mean, you can get a lot from this game from the characters on the side if you really just go over and listen to them. They'll generally have something to say to you, even if it's only 2 sentences, and then they never speak to you again, and it's kind of awkward. But hey. That happens in real life too, doesn't it? So we keep exploring the beach, and we find ourselves, at this little boardwalk, and there's a sign. It says "Dancing at Dusk," and you look down, and the game really caresses you in this direction. It really takes you to this point, and you hear music, and everyone's dancing, and of course, Elizabeth is dancing in the middle because she is liberated for the first time, and she's just having a good old time. And you go out on this pier, and you say, we need to keep going. We have to keep moving. We can't be here. And she goes, no, I want to dance. I want to do this thing. And it says you have to. You push a button, and the action of the button is something like convince Elizabeth to move to the next area. And you go, we're going to get an airship and go to Paris, and that is like saying TREAT to a dog or a cat, just ears up. And she's like, we're going to Paris. So you are trying to get your hands on the First Lady airship, which is quite formidable for where we just fell from, to speak frankly. But yeah, so you and Elizabeth are on your way to find this airship. There's a moment here which I would gladly volley to you, but this is around the time that we start to hear Girls Just Want to Have Fun, as put on by a calliope for the first time.
Yeah, it's very good. That arrangement's very good. This is the first time somebody mistakes Elizabeth for Annabelle. They call her Annabelle, and Elizabeth says, nope, that's not me.
I didn't even pick up on that.
Oh, that's what I thought you meant. But yeah, that's what happens. I want to take a quick step back about the voxophones. These are the same as the audio logs from Bioshock 1. I don't think they work as well in this one. In Bioshock 1, they served as literal diaries of people that were living in the world. And like we said in that episode, that world kind of lived in spite of you. That world didn't exist for you. right? So those diaries were views into people's lives. Here, they just, in Infinite, they just felt like story dump. Like, just, this is what's happening in the story, and I never felt like this was as immersive as Bioshock 1. So I got as many voxophones as I could, and some of them were really good, but like I just, it didn't seem like they served a purpose other than just to be there for me.
See, they helped me stitch together some parts of the story involving tears later on, and I don't want to say it felt forced, but it didn't feel. I don't want to say it didn't feel original because that's pretty obvious, but it for me, they helped propel the story along a little bit, but again, it felt like there could have been other ways to do it.
Precisely, but they didn't do anything additional to that like they did in 1. Like 1 did it so well. That's just a little thing. But anywho's, yeah, like you said, we're taking Elizabeth to Paris. You've got to spell it out, otherwise she goes crazy, like a dog wanting to go for a walk. When you get to the ticket counter, you find out the whole thing is a ruse. You can hear the ticket master kind of talking on the phone. He won't give you his full attention. And this is because that it was all a setup to attack you, the false prophet, and capture Elizabeth, the specimen. You have the option to like either get the gun out and on the guy, or just wait for him. If I waited for him, what happens is he stabs you in the hand, and that's when everybody starts attacking you. But either way, it's going to turn into a big fight.
And it does. Just before we get to the ticket booth, we do encounter the Lutece twins again. I forgot about that, and that's they offer you these two like kind of broachy things that Elizabeth can wear, and you have to pick it out for her. And you kind of sit there and go, oh, what's this going to mean later? But anyhow, yes, we go through the ticket booth, and she's wearing this brooch thing for the rest of the game, and we're going through this firefight. We find a voxophone with Daisy Fitzroy's voice on it, and we actually, while we're kind of traversing through the behind-the-scenes segment, we find that interracial couple, and they're, in one piece, and they're grateful to you.
I think they might not be there if you chose to throw the ball at them, but I'm not sure about that.
I couldn't speak to that either.
There are a couple of sections here in this area where you like can find little safe havens where Vox Populi resistance members are putting up like propaganda that says like we're not equal until the Negro's equal, which is like, yeah, like I full support that 100%. But of course, the game makes you feel like an idiot for supporting them later because of Bioshock Infinite reasons. This is also the area where you get your first lock-picking experience. Like we said before, Elizabeth does this automatically. It sucks. I wish they would have just put something in. But the way it works is if it's optional, you use lockpicks. If it's mandatory to the plot, Elizabeth uses her hairpin. Why? I couldn't tell you. It just seems so at odds with each other. But anyways, we're going into the hall.
I agree.
Yeah, it's silly. But we're going into the Hall of Heroes. This is sort of a memorial to wars that have passed. A buddy of an old war buddy of yours, Slate, talks to you over the loudspeakers. He says he'll give you the shock jockey, which, by the way, I guess I glossed over that. You need the shock jockey, which is electricity, to power some cars on the rail.
It's pretty consistently used. Shock jockey is.
Yeah, it's the same as in Bioshock 1, like the electric bolt. Very good. I like it. He says he'll give it to you if you give his men a good and honorable death. That whole thing.
Classic
That
Slate.
whole, that whole trope.
Textbook.
But he does two things happen here that kind of hint towards what's happening later. He gets upset because Comstock, quote, rewrote the books in terms of his war activities. He says Comstock was never there, but you were there. And he details your actions at Wounded Knee over the loudspeakers, like to Elizabeth, basically to scare her. But this sets up the fact that Comstock supposedly was there, but not really, but you were there. So we know there's interplay between you and Comstock. At this point, we know this is true. We just don't know why yet.
So to get to the Hall of Heroes, we go through Soldier's Field, which is just kind of another little boardwalkish sort of thing that exists in it's just kind of fraught with enemies. But yes, all of what Rick said about Slate and about the men dying an honorable death. So whenever we get to the Hall of Heroes, we have a couple of options, and we have to go through the different... It really should be Halls of Heroes, shouldn't it? Because there's kind of more than one to see, and that's not really anything to take points off the grade for necessarily. But, so it depicts each hall depicts different fights with different people. So we have the Boxer Rebellion down one hall, and we have the Battle of Wounded Knee down another. Now, I don't remember which I did first. I don't know if it truly matters what you do first in this game. I'm quite certain I did Battle of Wounded Knee first, which is against indigenous persons. That's kind of the caricatures that they draw here. And
yeah, again, it's using really gross imagery without actually having the balls to comment on it, if I might use that turn of phrase. It's gross. It's gross to me. Sorry, it just is.
No, it's gross imagery, but I think whenever, Slate talks about, like, what you did, and Booker is not proud of his actions, whenever he's like, no, was just, I don't know if he says I was just following orders or what he says his remarks were at that point. That, to me, pushes at least a little bit of a moral dialogue, at least a little bit. But also, any time that we have white people using suppressive imagery against indigenous persons or Asian people, which is what the other hallway is. That's the Boxer Rebellion. I mean, it's inherently bad, and I think that it becomes more inherently bad as time passes, but I'll get to that point later on in the story. But we basically do these wave battles against Slate's men down these different hallways. There are plenty of voxophones. There's some gear. I didn't really care for the gear as like an extra thing. Like I equipped it. I don't know. You can kind of equip these different items to they have different effects when you attack people. Like something is for your legs, something's for your hands, something's for your head, something's for your torso, and it really doesn't impact those parts of your body.
It feels like an RPG thing that is in a shooter for some reason.
It wasn't necessary.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like you. I used them because smoke them if you got them, but I don't know why they were there. That's right. I did forget. That's what we also do find out throughout this section that Elizabeth is Comstock's daughter, which was intentionally left out of the books that Elizabeth was reading. We also find out that Daisy Fitzroy, who is the figurehead of the Vox Populi, murdered Lady Comstock, which is what started the whole, which is what kicked off the whole feud between the Vox Populi and Comstock. You could argue what started with it was the slavery and things like that. But the murder of the murder of Lady Comstock is what kind of took it off.
So this particular scene, just to kind of comment on it, this is the last basically like hall of the Hall of Heroes, is when we find this memorial to Lady Comstock, and it's gorgeous, and it's the whole room. It's such a beautiful visual, like the one we're holding now, and we're looking for where we're going next in the game. Rick, I see you laughing, so that makes me feel accomplished. But there are voxophones, some of which have Lady Comstock's voice on them. And then we enter the room where there is a statue of Daisy Fitzroy getting ready to strangle Lady Comstock. And it's the third movement from Mozart's Requiem that's playing in this room. And it gives me chills. It was such a power move from a soundtrack standpoint. to use that. I just loved that. And we see, in the next room we have, what's his face? Comstock with the sword, and he is vanquishing the Vox Populi, which I think is actually Vox Populi, if I'm correct in the Latin, the
voice of the populace, popular voice, yeah.
So we traverse through that particular room, and then we find ourselves on a deck, and I think this is one of the first times that we experience some tears, isn't it, Rick?
I believe so. I think so. I don't think I wrote that down, but I think that's right.
It's a big fight that we have going on, and Elizabeth finds out that she can use some tears to aid us. And one of my favorite things, I just want to say real fast, and I'm going to volley to you, is the fact that very early on in the game with Elizabeth, who I love as a companion, by the way, very early on in the game, it's like Elizabeth can take care of herself. You don't need to protect her. And I was like, okay, thank Jesus, because I don't want to protect her. I just want to play the damn game.
I'm right there with you. I'm really glad Elizabeth doesn't have a health bar. She does get a bit damsel in distress-y later in the game, but the fact that you don't have to worry about Elizabeth dying is, just as a gameplay perspective, is great. And yeah, Elizabeth has the ability, if you look at a tear, it'll tell you this tear has health kits, this tear has cover. You can have Elizabeth open it for you so you can get those items or useful structures. It kind of goes back and forth between, like, sometimes Elizabeth has trouble opening tears, sometimes she can just do it. It kind of goes back and forth. It's not really consistent, but pretty much in every battle you'll find at least one, pretty much all the time. And they're useful, especially if there's ammo or health kits. But you do have to eventually, you give Slate's men the honorable death that he thinks they deserve. And then you confront Slate, who is wounded on the ground after you fight him a couple times.
Outside the gift shop.
Yeah, outside the gift shop. You've got to get that shock jockey from you, which you do. You can spare him or kill him. I don't think it makes much difference in the story.
What did you do?
I killed him.
I spared him.
Okay, so obviously he doesn't come back when you kill him, but, like, does he come back if you spare him?
Later on. He's just kind of in, like, a room staring into, like, the nether, so.
Oh, okay. Cool.
I forget the circumstances, but yes.
So now that you have the shock jockey, you can power up that gondola. And when you do, Comstock sounds the horn to speak to you. He tells Elizabeth that you'll just abandon her. Quote, what else can you expect from a killer of women? This motherfucker committed war crimes and enslaved black people, so don't pull the morality card on me. Like, get out of here, Comstock. What are you talking about? Elizabeth mentions that you kept saying Anna before when you were unconscious. Booker doesn't want to talk about his past at this point. Unless I miss some important audio logs, we don't really find out truly who Anna is until the end of the game. But we do know that Anna is an important person in Booker's past. But he doesn't want to talk about it.
No, he just says Anna.
Yeah.
We don't know.
So you power up the ship and you put in coordinates telling Elizabeth that you're going to Paris. And she immediately says, hey, those coordinates, that's not Paris, that's New York. And then she was like, I had nothing but time, so I read a lot of books. And I'm not sure how I feel. When it happened, I was like, oh, brother, like, come on. But, like, I guess it makes sense if you're locked in a tower and have literally nothing to do but read, you just got to read what you got. I don't know, whatever. But, so she's not happy that you lied to her and that you're taking her elsewhere, potentially into trouble. So she knocks you the fuck out with a wrench.
And she gets away.
Yeah, you go in and out of consciousness, and you see Elizabeth escape, and you see people, particularly black folks with the Vox Populi, coming and going. One of them takes a look at you and just knocks you out cold again. This is where, as you're coming to, you see, like, workers on the ship and stuff, and you eventually talk to Daisy Fitzroy. She is
nothing but. That's what she says.
Nothing but. Yeah, it's pretty cornball. this is where, of course, they say you're either with Comstock or with us. And then Booker, of course, is like, I don't want to take a side, because this game can't actually stand for anything. And because of that, they steal your airship. And they say, until you bring us some guns, we're not giving you this back. And they kick you overboard. And they have fair reason to be mad at you, because, like, their faction is getting blamed for all the violence that you caused in the square. Which, to be honest, I mean, their faction murdered Lady Comstock, so I'm not sure that their reputation is going to get any worse, necessarily. But,
Sure.
you know, they're not happy with the extra attention. So, yeah, they steal your airship, they kick you out of it, and they say, we will give it back to you if you give us guns.
Yep. Booker says, the direct quote is, I got no quarrel with you or your Vox Populi, but this is my airship you're hanging me out of, and I've got perilous need of it. To which Daisy says, really? Because it sure looks like old Comstock's airship to me. So, like, she immediately is like, no, I'm taking this. And yes, the agreement is that you get firearms for them. Booker's like, I'm not looking for a fight. And, you know, she's talking about the fight that's already going on, etc. and so forth. You are basically pushed out of the ship, as Rick said, and it is our job to find weapons. And Elizabeth, you know, we run into her and she's like, get away from me, stay away, I just want to talk to you. I said stay away. And she is just very angry. She's very grumpy because you're not going to Paris. You were trying to take her to New York, which are very different cities. If you didn't know that, they're very different. I don't blame Elizabeth. I would have wanted to go to Paris too, but that's a whole nother can of worms. She might have been disappointed that it wasn't 1980s Paris, but that's a whole nother can of worms. So at this point, you're trying to basically get her to be okay with you, and she's still kind of not comfortable with you as a whole. You are a means to an end, no more. That's literally all you are to her, is just kind of getting to this gunsmith that's in Finkton, which I was kind of confused by Jeremiah Fink, if I can be honest with you. Jeremiah Fink and Comstock, because they kind of felt like they were magnanimous in some sort of way, but at the same time they felt like they were very much on their own paths. I don't know what your thoughts were.
I mean, they were definitely in bed together in a sense, but, like, Fink felt like this game's version of Andrew Ryan, you know? As we're going down through here, we're going to Finkton next.
Yes.
And we hear a bunch of propaganda against the Vox from Fink, such as, like, an ox can't become a lion, and why would you want to? Who wants that responsibility? And things like, a good worker is a busy bee because a bee can't take a day off. How would the plants get pollinated and stuff like that? It's like cartoonishly evil, that kind of thing. Fink is he's a bad guy.
Bad boy.
Yeah, this scene is really cool when Elizabeth is running from you and she's like opening tears that bring like separates you via like a marching band or a train. Like, that's really cool. I thought that was really cool. You do catch up with her. You get slugged by a handyman that hits you onto a blimp, and then the handyman sinks the blimp. Elizabeth tears another blimp to catch you, and she does rejoin you again. It feels like as long as there's a MacGuffin, like, Elizabeth will join you, and that's that. Because, like you said, she's not fond of you right now, and then all of a sudden she's like, okay, well, I'll come with you. And it's like, okay, this is narratively weak, but it's fine. Elizabeth finds Slate's locker here with her mom's diary in it. Did you find that, Ben?
Yes, I believe I did find it, actually. That was at Finkton Docks, I believe, which is where you just described that skirmish between you and the handyman.
Yeah.
So. Yeah.
Yeah, that diary from Elizabeth's mom. Lady Comstock believed Elizabeth to be a bastard child, and that's why she sent Elizabeth to the tower. So I don't remember when exactly we learned this. We do learn that they're not Elizabeth's parents, but at some point we learn Comstock isn't. What's the word? Comstock is infertile, so like he can't have kids.
Yes.
but this is the first instance suddenly Elizabeth doesn't know who her biological parents are. What else do I have written here?
Kind of a damning journal.
Yeah, big time. 2021 playing through this, I kept thinking that Fink reminded me of Jeff Bezos because he's like overworking his workers, having propaganda about keeping costs down directly next to a giant golden god statue of himself, that kind of thing. But speaking of Fink, he reaches you on the elevator phone, and what does he say to you?
Where's the Fink? Because he has a whole can of worms. Now all I ask is you finish what you started. Is that it? No, is it earlier? There's too much Fink in here. DeWitt, Fink here. Listen, my boy, we had our eye on you, and I can tell you right now, you are our top candidate. Top. My associate, Mr. Flambeau, will help you with anything. Haha. Oh, but before he says, I'm Jeremiah Fink, and I want to share with you my personal creed. What is the most admirable creature on God's green earth? Why, it's the bee, which is what you talked about earlier.
Yeah, all that shtick. So what he means by you're his top candidate, eventually he's basically just going to throw you into a lot of wave battles, and that's how you prove yourself to him. But first, we got to go to Chen Lin's gun shop.
Yes.
Nobody's there at first. But when we come down, we find Mei Lin crying in front of their Buddha shrine. And they say that the police took Chen Lin. And she's really upset that the Vox Populi didn't help Chen Lin because Chen Lin was like aligned with them. So this is where the game starts to like really try to make you feel foolish for rooting for the non-racists. And it's like, I just think it's so narratively stupid. But anyway, you got to find the Good Time Club, which is a club I would absolutely go to because that's where Chen Lin is.
So we're going to rescue Chen Lin at the Good Time Club in, what is this, Finkton proper, I think is the Christian name of this area. Its baptismal name. And we have a hell of a wave battle in this place. I didn't die nearly as much in this game as I did in the first Bioshock, but I did die a couple of times in this one where we fight mechanized founding fathers, which, what are their names again?
I think they're just called Patriots.
That's it. They're called the Patriots, which if you use the possess vigor, you can turn them to help you, which was wonderful. They carry crank guns. You can take the crank gun. It's all right. Elizabeth is continuing to use tears to assist you as you progress. There's all kinds of money all over the place in the Good Time Club, but you're still looking for Chen Lin here, and there's kind of this weird stairwell where you encounter some policemen, and it's very out of place. It kind of feels like you're in like the Truman Show, like you've broken into a place you aren't supposed to be.
Is that wave fight? Is that the first handyman that we actually get to fight?
I thought that it might actually be. I think you're right. I think it's the first one that you actually take down. I'm not entirely sure.
It's somewhere around here. Fighting the handymen suck. Like, it sucks so bad. It's
They're
not
like big daddies.
They're like less interesting big daddies. Like, the concept of them is cool, and like there's one audio log that like you get to hear a woman talking about her husband that turned into one, and like that's real sad. But like they don't do anything with it, and like, for God's sake, their weakness is a giant glowing orb on their chest. Like, that's so video gamey.
It is. I think, though, it's a narrative on the advances of the technology between Infinite and 1958. With the regular, or 1960, the regular Bioshock. And I'm sure that Burial at Sea will kind of patch some of that together. So I'm definitely going to figure that out and,
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up because it's around here, too, that we get our first audio log of Fink talking about his brother. His brother, or maybe it's Fink's brother talking, but you learn that they started experiencing tears in reality themselves. They would pop up, and that's how Fink's brother was getting like music from the future, like Tainted Love and God Only Knows and Girls Just Want to Have Fun, and writing it for the time. And Jeremiah Fink thought that was dumb and that he wasn't taking advantage of the opportunity enough. Fink himself learned about vigors in this way. He also learned about man merging with machine. And this is heavily implied that he was seeing like Rapture, like the big daddies being merged, man and machine, and the plasmids and stuff like that.
So we're traversing this stairwell that leads to these jail cells, and we are kind of exploring them. We see, some advertisements for Chen Lin in the area, and in one of these cells is actually where Slade is if you spare him. And what is said is, Slade says, "You're a tin man now, a tin man." And Elizabeth says, "You spared him." And Booker says, "It wasn't no mercy. Comstock's men will surely take him." So he's kind of, not in a good place. And Elizabeth is asking if you ever get used to the killing. It's kind of an interesting little dialogue because she's recognizing, she who's been completely sheltered her whole life is now basically thrown into this profusely traumatic situation of following you around, who is mercilessly, for lack of a better word, taking out literally everyone in your path. But we're still trying to find Chen Lin amongst all of these cells, and looking for him anyway.
Yeah, we do find him. You see a list of prisoners, Lin cells number 9. You see videos of him being interrogated. Fink tells you at one point that, that he tricked you and he thinks that your time with Fitzroy is at an end, which you find it to be true because you find Chen dead. Elizabeth is really shook by this, and Booker just says, "Dead is dead." And it's like, okay, Booker is such a bad character. But the twins show up, and this is where the game takes a distinct, to me, this is where the game turns into a different game at this point. Like Bioshock Infinite up until this point is one game, and then this next part and everything to the end is another game. And they thought that they had cool ideas, so they just smushed them together. This is what I was talking about earlier with the incoherency. But the twins show up and they pull some multiverse theory stuff, showing you a tear of another Columbia where Chen never died. So Elizabeth tells you, well, we can't go back if we go in, but you have to go in. So you go in. And one of the first things that we see of interest through this tear are 2 men that we've already killed.
Oh, I was hoping you were still going. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, I could still go.
Just a little bit.
So these men are kind of flickering, in existence, and they've got bloody noses. The game's explanation for this is because they're dead in another timeline and alive here. They, quote, remember being dead. It's important to note that Booker has had nosebleeds already, too. This is just completely fumbled to me because, if they're doing a multiverse thing and they explain later there are infinite multiverses and different timelines, everybody would be dead in one of them. And, the game is inconsistent whether people remember or don't remember in and of itself. But wouldn't everybody just walk around flickering if these multiverses are infinite?
I suppose, but if we're to jump from one parallel to another, now I don't understand string theory and all that stuff entirely. I wish I could speak to it better. But from what I understand, in the parallel universe sort of theories, things will go on a certain amount, and in the other universe, if we're to jump to the parallel of this one, sorry, I'm trying to not get out of my own head here. But I guess what they're saying is that you have killed them in the other universe, but whenever you jump through that tear after you talk with the Lutece people, that's whenever we see people who are kind of on the verge. And I don't disagree that it can come off inconsistent. It kind of made sense to me, but the more I think about it, the more it kind of hurts in a way. So I'm sure that there is lore and stuff written down that can help me make sense of this, or I'll just call Brian. I think my Brian count is at 14 now, but anyhow, please.
Yeah, I don't know. It just feels like they're up their own asses about it. But you go back to the shrine the gun shop, and the shrine is now of Comstock. The shrine is now of Comstock. There's also no machinery in there, notably. But Chen, who is there, believes that there is, and he's quote-unquote working. He's also flickering and suffering from a nosebleed. So he's suffering from this sickness. I don't remember what they actually called it, but that's what's going on now. So what you want to do is pick up the tools in Shantytown that the police took from Lynn. This is so funny to me. I have written down here, like, Booker doesn't care about any of this stuff, like the multiverse theory that's happening, the like drifting in and out of reality. He literally doesn't care. He just keeps saying, we just got to get the guns for my airship. Like, he's such a comically one-note character. Super boring. But where do we get here? We get to the bottom of Finktown. It's way worse than it was before. This was a really weird part here. The game kind of like forces you to kill poor people if you want to like take the salts that are lying around. But also at the same time you open tears to give them food. I have no idea what the game is trying to do here. But
yeah, it was a little bit strange.
It is very bizarre. But that's Finktown. This is another quote that I wrote down here. Elizabeth, I don't understand why some men are treated fair and some like animals. You know, talking about the capitalism and the racism. Booker basically just says, yeah, it happens. Like, this is so comically bad. Like, just, oh my gosh. I laughed out loud. What's that?
What's the quote that Elizabeth said?
She says something to the line of, I don't understand why some men are treated fair and some like animals.
I'm going to try to find that because I like to know what he says. You know what I mean?
Sure. When you do find the tools, you obviously can't take them because they're too huge. So a tear just so happens to open up right there, where the tools aren't even there and presumably back in the shop. So we're hopping over through that tear to the other universe, another universe.
And it's at this point, is this not where we experience the fact that we're seeing posters of ourselves everywhere?
Yes, this is that timeline.
I was going to say, sometimes I get my timelines a little bit confused here, which I think is kind of makes sense. But we're walking around the streets, and it appears that in this timeline, the Vox Populi have revolted, and you are, at least you were, a hero. And it's kind of confusing because, like, you're seeing posters of yourself, and Elizabeth's like, oh my, that's you. Like, what's going on here? And, like, everyone's cheering, and you hear words of, like, this great sacrifice. And then you get a call, don't you? I don't think it's just a Voxophone. I think you get a call from Daisy Fitzroy, don't you? How does it work?
I think Daisy is around here in a blimp rousing the supporters to go kill Fink. Is that what you mean? Because she says DeWitt died for this day.
Mm-hmm. She does. And you are dead.
Right. Exactly. At some point, Elizabeth comments that Daisy seems to have changed the people in this timeline and that we could be a part of the revolution. Booker just says no, because Booker sucks. Another thing about this timeline that really pissed me off is it seemed to be like, going back to Ken Levine's centrism, it seems like, you know, he wants you to think that both sides are equally bad, so he's showing, like, revolution can be scary. And it just, like, it made me fucking think of the shitty line of argument that conservatives would take with Black Lives Matter, that whole protests being like, well, look at all the looting and the burning. And it's like, talk about missing the goddamn point. Like, I'm not saying that revolutions are always, like, peaceful and good and just. And maybe I don't expect you to agree with me 100% on this, Ben, but, like, if there is bloodshed in a revolution and it's against, like, shitty racists or religious zealots that are oppressing black people, fine. Like, fine. I don't care. That's all great. I just it bothers me here because, like, it seems like he's intentionally, like, really trying to make you feel like people fighting for a revolution and people actively oppressing others are the same kind of bad. You know what I mean?
I didn't pick up on that at all. In this instance, knowing what I learned about the death of Lady Comstock, which is something that, again, Brian kind of caught me up on after I beat the game. I think that in this universe, because it is 1912, and I'm not saying that this is what people would do, Daisy Fitzroy is a very, as my mother would say, she's a very piss and vinegar character. Like, she's very strong. There's like a lot of spark to her. And I think in this universe, because of the circle of time and the parallels, and because Booker basically told her. So hold on. Let me go back, because I'm going to get myself tied up here. The way it was explained to me, and Rick, we can cut this if you need to, but the way it was explained to me was that the Prophet Comstock more or less told Daisy Fitzroy to kill Lady Comstock. So he vilified Daisy Fitzroy. He demonized her and the Vox Populi to the point that they were so suppressed that they started to rise again. You know, they kind of can't get themselves up. So what happens is Booker DeWitt gets them all to rage too much. You know what I mean? Like, and I don't mean rage too much. It's not like
I understand what you're saying, and that is what happened. That's my understanding of it. But it's the notion of pitting those two things together, the evil of oppressing others due to race and class, and the evil of a violent uprising for justice. Like, Ken Levine is putting those two things in tandem with each other, saying, well, they're both bad. And this is around here, I believe, I'm not looking at the right place in my notes, but somewhere around here, this is where we get that line. You know, the only difference between the only difference between Comstock and Fitzroy is how you spell the name. Like, that's what I just fundamentally do not agree with, is like, you cannot pit these two together. I don't care if the revolution was violent. You cannot pit those two together. It's not the same thing.
No, and that's just it. I didn't pick up that in this. I didn't see them as equal, and like, I don't know. That's just me. I didn't see them as that was what Ken Levine was necessarily saying, because I think I think that the racism and the oppression and all of that is absolutely horrible. But I think what Ken Levine is trying to say is that literally it is all Booker DeWitt's fault. Every possible bad thing that has happened to anybody in any universe, from the mind, control evangelism paired with the oppression, paired with the massacre. You know what I mean? That's the vibe I get.
Yeah, that's narrative in the universe. That's right. But like, as a symbolic message, as like reading outside of the game, reading into like real life theming and allegory, metaphor, things like that. That's where I don't agree with it. Like, it's disgusting to me. But where are we? Oh, right. So Daisy is going to rouse her supporters because they got to kill Fink, which is fair. Fink's got to go. He's a bad guy. Both of the Lynns in this place are dead.
Yes.
So that's not good. Fitzroy, you get on an elevator and Daisy calls. You answer, and she says, "My Booker died for the cause. You're either an imposter or a ghost. You complicate the narrative." I have written after that, no, that's the shitty writing, actually. But I have a feeling that my little quips are going to wear on you, so I'm going to stop including them at every turn.
Quip away.
But yeah, so Daisy is suspicious of you. This is where we get that audio log of Fink talking about the tears, showing him man and machine, an irreversible process,
yes.
And also where he's talking about building Songbird.
Yeah, that's just before, isn't it? Or is it right after?
Yeah. But that's the first, like, Bioshock 1 reference that we're getting. Do you want to take it over where we see Fitzroy confronting Fink?
With the child, right? Whenever the child's in her hands, right?
Well, we got to make her seem evil, so yeah.
And that's just it. She's trying to, quote, like, make a point. Like, this is what needs to be done. You see, the founders ain't nothing but weeds. Cut them down, they just grow back. If you want to get rid of the weed, you got to pull it up from the root. Which is a poetic statement when you think about what happens at the end of the game. But we'll save that for the end of the game. There's only one way to be sure, and she screams because who took Daisy out but Elizabeth, who is just kind of beside herself over what she did. And Elizabeth says, at first she is, you can tell she's kind of shaken up, but then she says, I guess it runs in the family. And Booker's like, Elizabeth. And he tries to comfort her, and she like tries to get away, and it's fine. You know what I mean? Like it's...
Yeah. Yeah, so now not only is Fink dead, but Daisy's dead. Elizabeth asks you, how do you wash away the things that you've done? And Booker just goes, you just live with it.
Yeah, you learn to live with it.
Ugh. Booker is the worst. This is also where Elizabeth changes her clothes and cuts her hair. This reminded me of Final Fantasy IX, Ben, with Dagger.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like the game being like, look at how this character has changed. You know?
Oh, yeah, and she's been changing gradually. They did a good job of pacing her change, I thought.
Yeah. But I don't remember exactly what happens. I don't know what I was thinking when I wrote these notes. I just wrote, uh-oh, Stormbird. This is where he crashes your ship. Songbird. Songbird. At the bottom of the crashed wreckage, the twins are playing a piano and bickering about the right notes. It's kind of comical. I like the twins quite a bit.
Yeah, they're good.
Elizabeth is freaking out because she says if they complete the tune, Songbird will come back, and she does not want that to happen. But they say it doesn't actually matter because the instrument is wrong. But they do tell you if you can sing to it, it'll take you wherever you want to go. And they say, just ask Comstock if you want to know more. And then they hand you a little card. I think I misunderstood what that card was. It's the Stormbird defense system. It looked like a mechanical cross-section of Comstock's head. Is that what it was?
I thought it was the cage.
I think it was. I don't know how I misinterpreted that.
So, the twins are talking with us about the Songbird or Stormbird, you know, whatever you want it to be, it's fine. And they're trying to figure out the song. Again, the instrument's wrong. And this is whenever Elizabeth kind of reflects on, the Songbird and the Songbird kind of being around her whole life. It's kind of interesting because she seems to have a love and yet hate relationship with it. I kind of get it, but the bird is her warden, I think, is what she says. Yeah, because he was my warden, but he's just Comstock's pet, isn't he? Just like me. And she's under the impression that you guys have to go to Comstock's house. We're going to find him. We should start there. Where are these people going? Where are these people going? Wherever the Vox Populi ain't. You know, it's kind of more of that little old school kind of talking, I guess. I don't know. So they're starting to talk about how the world floats because they're on a gondola, they're ascending, they're going towards Comstock's dwelling. And Elizabeth reveals that she realized who those two twins are and how they made the city float, to which Booker's like, giant balloons, which, you know, okay, whatever, I guess, maybe, but like, no, you don't see the balloons, Booker, get it together. And then Elizabeth talks about quantum particles and how, you know, things are suspended in time at a fixed height. And then Booker says, so not giant balloons? It's kind of funny, but it's kind of like, I don't know if this humor really fits here necessarily. But she talks about, like, how this works to the best of her understanding. And now we have Robert and Rosalind, who are kind of bickering at different platforms as we are ascending on this gondola boat, like through the sky. And, you know, they're finishing each other's sentences, and it's all very, like, it's a little bit punchy. But, I mean, you know, you start to learn that they're kind of behind this world that is floating in the sky. They're behind Columbia for all intents and purposes. And that's when we, at the very end of the long cable car ride, we end up at Port Prosperity.
Yeah. Yes. You do some fighting here. And eventually you find a door that you need to go through, which is locked via a code. Of course, the code is 0451. Little tongue-in-cheek nod there. But at this point, a mechanical Comstock statue starts to play the Stormbird songbird tune, and she hushes you, and you kind of hide down. And it almost gets you, but it doesn't quite see you. So you've got to go and navigate through various districts of Columbia here to get to Comstock House, including the Market District, the cemetery, where you can see the Lutesses kind of digging their own graves, the Lutess lab, and such like that. I don't know if this was a glitch, but at this point, my navigation key kind of stopped responding very well. It just kind of kept putting me in circles. But this was kind of
mine actually did too. Yeah.
Okay, this part kind of frustrated me just because of that, but it was not as bad as one of the later areas. You've got to cross through a gate to get to the Comstock House. What's weird is the security system recognizes that Elizabeth's clothes are Lady Comstock, so it thinks that she is Lady Comstock, but it doesn't. Or hold up. I said that completely backwards. The system mistakes Elizabeth for Lady Comstock because of her clothes.
Yeah.
But they see that her fingerprints don't match up, and they say something like are you not feeling well or something like that, like something ridiculous. So naturally, it's Occam's razor time. If you don't have Lady Comstock's fingerprints, we're just going to go get her whole hand and go to her grave and get that hand.
Yeah.
Which I when they said that, I was like, all right, I mean, I guess. How else are you going to do it?
I'm in. I'm fine with that. I can get down with that. Whenever, I'm not against that. But by this gate is, of course, another statue of Lady Comstock and more kind of vigil candles and so forth. And yes, you're exactly right. The door asks if Lady Comstock is unwell. So you're right on the money there. So we're traversing through downtown Emporia, as the area is known, because, Lady Comstock is preserved like an old Catholic saint, and you're trying to break open the casket when you hear the voice of Comstock speaking, and he basically necromances Lady Comstock and says, if you won't listen to me, perhaps you will listen to your mother. And she comes back as this poltergeist banshee creature. And you don't know where she goes, and she summons an army of undead people that you have to kind of defeat in wave battles. She opens some tears herself, which I find kind of curious. But that circle will be tied together in time.
This is by far the worst fight in the game. By far. Because it's not interesting. She just continually spawns enemies, and continuously, they do not stop.
She can kind of favorite.
She can kind of hit you with these ghost energy blasts, but you've got to hit her. Sometimes she's invulnerable when she's doing stuff, but otherwise you just got to take her down. It's super tough. It's really tedious. And for some reason they repeat it 2 more times after this.
It was kind of fetch questy and not in a good way.
They repeat, with those truths or the 3 tears, but they repeat the fight 2 more times. The worst fight in the game. And I swear it had to have been a situation we just want to fill up some time. We got to fill the game clock. Why would you do this? It's so bad. But Ben, you mentioned the fetch quests. To get to the fetch quest, we find the Lutess twins digging their own grave after we take care of the first Lady Comstock. And they're giving us an English syntax conjugation lesson on the verbs, lives, lived, will live, or things like that. And they give you this timey-wimey Doctor Who stuff about how everybody exists across time, and Lady Comstock does too. They say she finds this condition disagreeable, which kind of makes me laugh. But basically,
yes.
she is dead here, she exists elsewhere, that kind of thing. I'm not against Doctor Who or anything. I like Doctor Who a lot. I just thought this is just absurd and ridiculous. But the Lutess twins tell you that they think it's a shame that you need Lady Comstock's help, but finding her 3 truths might make her, quote, more agreeable. So, Ben, this is where we get to what you called another fetch quest.
Yeah, and I'm not generally against fetch quests when they're done well, but in this case, the game didn't need it. the game didn't necessarily need these tears. I mean, I get it, but I don't think it needed them. So we find different sorts of conversations in these tears, and of course we're still killing off this undead troop of enemies. And we find all of these little truths, at least, which, it's important information that finding out that the prophet is quite sterile. So he is unable to produce a child. And Lady Comstock says, "That's a lie. Come and get your little bastard. I want her out of my house." Which, to be honest, could have led to why Comstock wanted her killed. It's just, and
I think that's exactly why. I think it's in like the third truth or something. Like you hear, it's not Comstock, but it's somebody else telling Fink that he's the only one that can make it look like an accident or something like that.
Something like that, yeah. But like that's those are the things for me that save the game tremendously. And I don't mean save the game, but like improve it for me, is the fact that like it is so like infinite. Oh, geez, I didn't mean to mention half of the title of the game. I'm really sorry. I kind of feel like I was watching Family Guy and looking at Peter Griffin being like, "That's a real Family Guy," which of course he isn't. Anyhow, so we find these little tears that have been created by the ghost, because you're following the footprints of the ghost to these different locations about town. And at this point, the being that is your mother is referred to as a siren. When you defeat the siren, you kind of talk back and forth with her. Elizabeth says, I owe you an apology. Comstock used me to bring you back, but I brought back a version of you from the reality I'd built up in my own head. He pretended to love you like he pretended to love me. I am not your husband's bastard. I am his victim, but my days of victimhood are done. We must forgive each other because there is far worse than you or I. And then the siren confesses, the prophet killed me. And this is where things get kind of dicey, because you wouldn't keep a secret. Exactly what we were just talking about, Rick. And I like this sort of stuff, but time travel, it can be dicey to try to tackle well. And that's where I kind of got confused in this game a little bit, but I digress.
Well, it gets dicey too, because like we get another audio log too that reveals that Fink did end up killing the Lutesses, but they came back because of timey-wimey reasons. But, like, I don't remember if we learned this here, but we also learned that the twins are the same person. They're just in twin form because of... I'm not going to lie, I do not understand why they're in twin form. I understand it as a baseline that they are the same person.
Maybe it's like the Muppets Christmas Carol.
Oh, of course.
Marley and Marley Scrooge. So, yeah, that's the song. But anyway. There's not supposed to be two Marleys, come on. I'm so sorry.
I didn't expect the Muppets Christmas Carol to make an appearance in this one.
It is the best Christmas Carol rendition of all time. I will fight anyone on that.
I believe you. That it's the best and that you'll fight.
I don't fight often, but, they use period costumes. They show that Scrooge's, Tiny Tim's family have clothes from a decade earlier because they're too poor. Like, they literally pay attention to every detail. Anyhow. Digressing.
Every detail.
Every.
No, it's okay. On the bridge to the Comstock house, Songbird comes back in. He swoops up and destroys the bridge. You get knocked out again, and in this stream, both Elizabeth and the Lutece twins are there. When you wake up, Songbird is about to kill you, but Elizabeth kind of persuades it not to, and she says to take her home instead. And it does. So now you have to go get Elizabeth because Songbird has her. You're crossing the bridge, like a flash of light occurs, and then suddenly there's snow in July, with tears opening up all over the place. And we can hear Elizabeth protesting. So we can assume that we have entered a tear, and we're in another timeline. In this one, when you enter the house, there's a monument to Elizabeth, sort of the same way there was to Lady Comstock. And we can also hear her over the PA, similar to Comstock and Fink before, talking about the prophecy and how, you are a false prophet and things like that.
It's strange because you hear her over the PA, and at the same time, you hear Comstock trying to console his child, Elizabeth. about the amount, they're starting to do these sort of experiments, and Comstock says, we're going to cure you. I'm not sick. It's this really curious banter that you're kind of confused about. And you start to say, okay, well, maybe this is what they're talking about with the tower, and so forth. And then there's a Dr. Pedifog, I suppose was his name.
There's a line later on where they say that they're going to cure her of her greatest illness, hope. And I was like, what in the 90s sitcom superhero ass is this? Like, it's so cheesy. But that comes later.
Elizabeth continues to talk over the PA, even going so far as to mention Sodom and Gomorrah, for what is Columbia, if not a different arc in a different time. So it's starting to give you some more hints that we're,
They do this a lot. What is Columbia but this of this? It's like, you could say that about anything, man. I mean...
Yeah. So at this point, we need to rescue Elizabeth from this procedure that's going on, which is a tremendous wave battle of sorts. And to be honest, I didn't want to fight anyone. I got really tired of it. So I just kind of ran through and flipped the switches to stop the procedure. I killed the doctors because, they're guilty by association. Get your ass out of here. And that's when we go down to Elizabeth. And again, we still have her voice kind of playing over the PA at different points. And we go down to find Elizabeth, who I believe is our Elizabeth at this point. She was just captured in this universe. And she has this thing tethered to her back. It's sort of like a giant Spinal Tap sort of device.
Yeah.
And I don't really know what its purpose. I guess they were trying to stop her from being able to do the things she can do, but...
I assume it's related to the siphon, like siphoning her powers from her.
Yeah, kind of like Adam in the last game, and in a way. But you remove that, and she is relieved. Yeah,
it's at this point in the game where where I was like, "Huh? Do you remember how this game used to be about fascist Comstock and Vox Populi Fitzroy? Huh? How'd we get here?" We glimpsed over something that I wanted to talk about was the stealth section, and it's a bad stealth section. Yeah, because they mentioned before that they wanted some stealth in this game, and they just completely fumbled it here. Like, it's not good and it's not fun. So there are these, they're called the Boys of Silence. I think I called them Silent Boys, which is funnier to me.
Yeah, it is.
Their design is kind of cool. They're essentially like young boy children that have how would you describe it? Like horn style ears so they can hear, and then a searchlight coming out of their face.
Correct, yes.
You can't hurt them, and they can't hurt you. There's no reason, it's just a reskinning of a security camera. So I don't get why they're here. Apparently, what I learned from the WAF episode was they originally in design wanted these enemies to only be able to detect you if they heard one of every sound you make. So you shooting, running, walking, jumping, etc. And once they heard every sound that you can make, they would instantly know where you were. And they decided to scrap that idea because they felt it was too hard to communicate to the player, which is fair. I mean, that would be a difficult thing to tell the player to watch out for. Infinitely cooler idea than a security camera with feet,
I mean, it gave me a good fright whenever I was, operating the thing and letting her free, and I turned around and there was one right there. That made me jump.
That jump scare.
It was a good one, but I guess that happens right before we liberate Elizabeth, so that's my fault for glossing over that too.
Aside from that one, I didn't I made sure to stealth through this whole thing. No, that's a lie. I got caught by the first one, and when you get caught, they summon these Patriot people enemies that are all around. They're there regardless, but they don't interact with you unless you get caught. They're tough to kill, and they also don't drop anything. So they don't drop ammo or anything. So I was I don't want to waste my bullets on this, No,
and the game does make you work for that whenever you are stealthing through, because if you do, you have to waste a lot of ammunition. But they're kind of meat suits. They're not doing anything. They don't see you unless the siren goes off. So I mean, it's kind of reminds me of the Guardian stuff in the Legend of Zelda series, in Skyward Sword. There's kind of that kind of thing going on. but it just, I don't know, it worked okay. It was kind of creepy and kind of, that enemy was the Silent Boy or whatever his name was, kind of Lynchian in his appearance, but otherwise it wasn't exactly a grand slam.
Yeah, you're right. It is kind of Lynchian. That's true. I know that's become like a buzzword these days, but like it really is.
David Lynch is a monument in visual media. So
God bless that man. He's
incredible. And everybody, and like I have not heard a bad thing about him from people. Like there's no like, oh, he got weird with me. It's no like, oh yeah, like in The Return, Twin Peaks: The Return, there's a young assistant in the show, and you think, oh, he's probably flirting with her the whole time, kind of thing. And she's like, no, he really inspires me, and he's training me to be his protege. And I'm like, what?
I love people on Twitter will like make up things that he said, like in his style of speaking. Things like, this morning I had a cookie, and I thought about it. What a wonderful thing! What a miraculous thing this cookie is! What a life we live. I love that man.
Oh, me too. So all of this to say, after we liberate Elizabeth, she says, we're not leaving. We are going to find Comstock. And Booker says, why? And she says, you saw what he turns me into. I will not allow that. And Booker says, and so what? You're going to kill him. And then Elizabeth says, is this where you start moralizing, Booker? You forget. I know you. And so you start to... I kind of like that. I kind of like that Elizabeth's like, no. You ain't,
It's the closest that Booker ever gets to being called out for being shitty in the game.
I mean, I don't know if he's called out because he just is shitty. And he is especially shitty by the end of the game. But that's a whole nother can of worms that we're approaching. So Elizabeth says, we're going to go to his house. We're going to find him. We're going to, we're going to get to the bad boy. Which after you get through, I guess you go through the house and you go to the Hand of the Prophet, which is the ship itself, is it not?
It is the ship itself. Two quick things. Whenever they're talking about confronting Comstock, Booker gives the classic line, I won't let you kill him, 'cause I'm gonna do it myself, which made me literally laugh out loud when I heard it. But one thing that I think we may have skipped over that I think is pertinent to talk about is previously, before we returned back to 1912, where we shut off the generators. That's about where we're at right now, right?
I think so.
We shut off the generators where Elizabeth opens up the tear with the tornado that comes in.
I think so. We've just basically set her free, and we're about to go to the Hand of the Prophet.
Yeah. Before that, when we first find Elizabeth, she's old and withered. Yes. And she kind of takes us up and lets us look out at the city that's on fire, burning. Basically, what she says is that in all the realities, Booker could never get past Songbird. Like, he could just never do it. So he never had a hope to save her. So she used all of her energy to cause Armageddon, which I don't know why you would do that when you could do anything else. But anyway,
you really hate New York. You really hate New York, and you'd never wanted to go.
Hey, I'm walking here. Hey, I'm going through tears here. But she gives you a card with advice on it to give to, quote, her on, quote, how not to become me. So this all becomes important after we confront Comstock, which we are about to do. We also get the line from the beginning of the game, Booker, are you afraid of God? Yep. No, but I am afraid of you. Like, it sounds so, like, it's a good way to start it at the beginning of the game, but, like, it falls so flat here. Like, it was like, no, Booker is not afraid of Elizabeth. What are you talking about? But, I don't know. Anyway, you get to the top, you see a model of Elizabeth's tower, showing the bottom was like a sort of siphon. This is where Elizabeth says that when she was little, she could open tears wherever she wanted, and whenever she wanted, going wherever she wanted to go. And the Comstock was draining her of her power. And this is, Ben, where we confront Comstock for the first time. It
is. And we walk into this, it's a little oasis in the middle of the Hand of the Prophet. And this is a pretty big scene. And Comstock's talking about, look at Look at DeWitt, child. There's something about him that you just can't put your finger on. Soon you'll understand the man I am and the man he isn't, which is a really curious line from what we end up learning. Elizabeth says, Booker, those skylines lead up to the next deck. If we clear the lines of those pods, we should be able to get to the next deck. Actually, forgive me, we're not in the Oasis yet. He's talking to us over the PA. So this is whenever he's saying, look, there's something about him. And Elizabeth is helping you climb the ship to get to where he is. And Comstock's still talking about the false shepherd, and you ride up to the very top, and exactly as Rick said, that's where the monument is, and you walk into this oasis of this room, and Comstock says, come here, child. Well, come on, I don't bite. My, oh my, how you have grown. And Elizabeth says, tell me, what am I? And Comstock says, look at you, child, you're a mess. And Booker says, hey, look over. Comstock, Elizabeth, everything I've done to keep you safe. Safe from what? And the conversation goes on, and Comstock is getting uncomfortable, and he's wanting to kind of baptize her, I guess, is kind of what I'm seeing here, because there's a baptismal font in front of him while he's giving you all of this this spiel about the false shepherd, Booker DeWitt, for he shall be as a wall between her and destiny. DeWitt, I'm a fool. I've sent mighty armies to stop you. I've rained fire on you from above. I did all that I could to keep you from her, and all I needed to do was tell her the truth. Ask him, child. Ask him what happened to your finger. Ask DeWitt. And it's this whole kit and caboodle, and Booker, in this rage, goes up and slams his head on the baptismal font. I'm kind of paraphrasing this, but he is like hitting it off, and he's saying, did you get what you wanted? Tell me. Tell me. And then Comstock, and I love this line, his last words are, it is finished. That, from a biblical standpoint, like, last words of Jesus Christ during the, crucifixion. Other than, into your hands I commit my spirit. It is finished is the other.
Yeah, it's a great scene. Really rewarding to finally have Comstock receive his comeuppance. It's so funny to me that Comstock has been such a villain, constant villain in Elizabeth's life. But the moment he says, hey, ask DeWitt about your finger, suddenly she just turns on DeWitt like, yeah, hey, hold on, what about my finger?
I thought that was strange too, yeah.
But you tell her you don't know what he's talking about. And all of a sudden, Elizabeth, like from this point on, Elizabeth slowly starts to gain like all the knowledge in the entire universe. And it starts here when she says, you do know, you just don't remember. And Booker starts to have another nosebleed.
Yep.
So you're still traversing towards Monument Island, except this time the Vox intercepts on their airships. Because they see you as a Comstock ally. And we've got to make the Vox seem as evil as possible because Ken Levine. And this leads to really the final battle. Elizabeth pieces together that the coded message that she received wasn't like a message, it was like a musical notation, like a music puzzle.
Yeah.
Yeah, like they, for some reason, drew a cage instead of writing out the notes. But so you summon Songbird, and suddenly he's just this super friendly dude, like super friendly beast, for whatever reason. But now you get
Comstock, maybe.
But you get to use him now in this last battle, which is pretty much just like waves and waves of combat, and then you using Songbird to take out the enemy Zeppelins. How did you feel about it?
I didn't like the Zeppelin aspect of it, but the wave battle was a very worthy opponent, I felt. A very worthy opponent, I felt. But, I don't know, the possess salt vigor thing didn't really work well on the Founding Fathers at that point, so it... Like, what was the point of it? I don't know. It was fine. It was just difficult. And you had to protect the core of the ship or whatever that specific thing was, which is...
Yeah, which is on the outside, giant and glowing. Like, it's such a video game thing to do.
Yeah, there were a few very video game things in this game, and that's kind of... Again, from a story standpoint, and I'm sure as I play this game again, And as I study all of the lore and the story around it, I'm sure that I will like it. And I think that's, kind of why I like it, because I can tell that there's a lot more to it that I didn't see. But yeah, you're protecting this core of the ship so that you can get to Monument Island and bring down the rest of it. Isn't that what we're trying to do, basically?
Yeah, you're trying to get to Monument Island where the siphon is and get Songbird to destroy the siphon, which is going to give Elizabeth her full powers back. And you do that, but when Booker summons Songbird, he loses control. Right as Songbird is about to hit you in the ship, Elizabeth opens a tear and suddenly we are underwater. We are inside, but Songbird is on the outside underwater. Songbird cannot exist underwater, so he dies. They tried to make this very emotional. I could not bring myself to care about Songbird.
See, I didn't feel like it was pitched as emotional, but I did look at this mechanized bird demon and I was like, fare thee well. Like you were a bird thing.
Good job, bird.
I didn't get any emotion from it, but I'm sure to somebody it was that.
But Ben, you gave a little chuckle because we're not just underwater, but where are we?
We're in Rapture, everybody, and the bathysphere floats out over Rapture's skyscrapers, and Booker's like, a city at the bottom of the ocean? Ridiculous. LOL. Yes, it is, but didn't stop Andrew Ryan. And then, so we're going through... We're going through Rapture, and when we come up in the bathysphere, that's when we see thousands of lights in the sky, and she's like, oh, these are thousands of doors opening at once. My God, are they beautiful? And Booker's like, are they stars? And then Elizabeth starts leading you, and you start going across these landings to different lighthouses. Or is that the lighthouse at this point?
Before you enter the lighthouse, it's locked. And by the way, I agree. Arriving in Rapture is super cool. It was just too little too late for me with this game. I was so fed up with it by this point. But before you're able to get into the first door, it's locked. And Elizabeth looks into her hands, and there's a key. And Booker asks where'd that come from, and she says, it's a key. It's always been here. I just couldn't see it. Like, I literally laughed out loud at that.
Don't play Kingdom Hearts.
Like, that's what it is. It's Kingdom Hearts. It's Disney. That's like such a Disney line.
I think it might have been, and I'm not trying to just justify, I think it might have been like her level of enlightenment or perhaps having the full scope of her powers back, but I don't know. Unless I get to talk to Ken directly, I'm never going to know.
That's a good point. You mentioned her enlightenment. At this point, she knows like everything in the universe, and like you can tell when you're talking to her that she's always like 2 steps ahead of you. Like she knows what's going on. She's like holding your hand through it, kind of. I had a glitch here. So like when you're going through the lighthouses and you can see your other selves walking on the bridges too, which by the way, visually this was great. I loved this.
Oh yeah.
I'm a big sucker for that. Like as you're walking and the bridge is building itself, I love it. It's so good. The glitch that I had was in the distance, one of my copies of Elizabeth running next to Booker was 10 feet in the air. And she was running just fine, but at one point she falls.
Oh no. Oh no.
It was hilarious. I mean, she just like out of nowhere just falls from the sky and just kept going. Yeah, that was like, I didn't have many glitches in this game. It was mostly like little minor stuff, like Elizabeth's like dress would do weird things, but that was the biggest one, and it was awesome. I loved it.
Yeah, no, that's hilarious.
Meet me in the crowd. People, throw your love around. Love me, take it into count. Happy, put it in the ground where the flowers grow. Gold and silver shine. Shiny, happy people holding hands. Shiny, happy people
walking along these bridges, we're opening doors to lighthouses, and it's just the same scene over and over again. We have to keep following this path forward. It's very curious until one fateful door opens, and Booker says, "Wait a minute, I know this place. I was here. It must have been 20 years ago, right after Wounded Knee. I was looking for..." And the preacher says, "Come on, now time's a-wasting." And Elizabeth says, "Why were you here?" And the preacher says, "Are you ready to have your past erased? Are you ready to have your sins cleansed? Are you ready to be born again? Take my hand." And Booker said, No, I don't want to." And Elizabeth says, "But you already did, didn't you?" And then, Booker takes the preacher's hand. "Are you ready to be born again? Do you hate your sins? Do you hate your wickedness?" And all positive affirmations from Booker at this point. And Booker says he wants a clean slate. And right before he's baptized, Booker says, No, wait, stop it. Get me off. No, get off me. Get off. Not get me off. Oops. We should edit that out. Get off. And he does not accept his baptism. And Elizabeth's confused. And he said, "If you think a dunk in the river is going to change the things I've done, let's get out of here." And Elizabeth says, "Not until we find Comstock." And Booker says, "Comstock's dead." And she said, "No, he was here this way." And Booker, you're back in his private investigator's office, and he watches a scene he once had with a client, who he knows now is Robert Lutece.
Yes. Yeah, we learned that it was Lutece that hired you to bring him the girl, to wipe away the debt. The interesting thing is you have to go through a door that you've never been through before, and in the next room there's a crib with your daughter. And you keep saying, "No, this was never here. This was never here." And Elizabeth says something along the lines of like, you have to progress, or like, it's always going to happen. There's no reason to not do it, or something like that.
Room.
Yeah, something like along the lines of like, it's inevitable, so why fight it? Like that kind of thing. Which in and of itself, I don't mind trains of thought that are like that. It's just within the context of this game, I was still shaking my head through the whole thing. But you give up your baby, and Elizabeth says it's not over until the prophet never existed. So Booker is like, "Yeah, let's go kill baby Comstock." Like, I'm gonna go smother that baby. Like, he's real into killing babies at this point. Baby Comstock.
Yeah, well,
I was gonna keep riffing until you laugh, so I'm glad that you did.
You're good.
So you go through another door and you see a young Comstock. And you try to take the girl back from him. He is going to send her through a portal with the Luteces. I don't remember if it's just one Lutece or two at this point. I think there's two, right?
I think in the boat there is. Yeah.
I think no, before the boat even. Like, I think Rosalind is on the other side of the tear, and Robert is with Comstock.
Probably.
And they're saying, like, "Come on, just go through. And Comstock steps through, you're pulling the baby, and they tell them to close the tear. And as they close the tear, the tip of the finger of the baby gets chipped off.
Mm-hmm.
So we learn here that your baby Anna is actually Elizabeth. Sort of. And she is, but I say sort of because of the scene that we're going to get to here in a minute.
Oh yeah, and that's, it's at this point, one of the things Elizabeth says is, about, what are we doing? Your Comstock's dead. We can just go on with our lives. We don't need to. And Elizabeth says, "Dead? You mean like Chen Lin, like Lady Comstock? He's alive in a million worlds. It's not over because the prophet is dead. It will only be over when he never lived in the first place." Which, kind of goes back to the killing the baby thing.
You're playing, anytime any story does the million universe theory, it's so hard to do a story like that well. And like, I don't dislike the ending. I don't think it's good, but like, I don't dislike it. But I don't know. It's such a jumbled mess. And I think, again, it goes back to what I said before. I think they had a lot of good ideas, and they put those into a jelly bean jar, and they said, "Here's our product. Look at how much of it there is." And it's like, but these don't play well together. That's, we didn't even get to the ending, so I'm going to just stop. So let's actually get through the ending, though.
Happy to help us there. Anna, no, I'm so sorry. Baby's taken away. Elizabeth says, she's gone, Booker. Anna's gone. You shared this room with your regret for almost 20 years till one day a man came to see you, offered you a chance at redemption, a chance for us to be together. How interesting. Robert says, I told you it would work. We already know how it works. The question is, will he? And this is, you're back. I think you're back on the boat at this point, or you're losing consciousness. And Booker's still kind of heartbroken about Anna. Robert and Rosalind are talking about, well, the brain adapts. He's manufacturing new memories from his old ones. How far back, do we need to go? Is how would one know how far back to go is what Robert's asking. Booker says, that's the only way to do it. Go back to when he was born. I'll smother that son of a bitch in his crib, which exactly what you said. And that's when you're back at the baptismal ceremony that you passed up earlier. And then Booker DeWitt, are you ready to be born again? He says, what is this? Why are we back here? Elizabeth says, this isn't the same place, Booker. Booker, of course it is. I remember, wait, you're not, who are you? And there's multiple versions of Elizabeth who show up. Elizabeth 2 says, you chose to walk away. The main Elizabeth says, but in other oceans you didn't. You took the baptism. Elizabeth 3, you were born again as a different man. To which Booker realizes he's Comstock. And another Elizabeth says it all has to end. To never have started, not just in this world, but in all of ours. And Booker says, smother him in the crib.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this leads to the last line where they're calling you both Booker DeWitt and Zachary Hale Comstock, and then you say, no, I'm both, and they drown you. Mm-hmm. The thesis of this being, in case anybody listening is a bit confused, is that across all universes, what happens is Booker either takes the baptism and becomes born again as Zachary Hale Comstock, presumably because he feels free of all of his other sins, begins to sin even harder, what with the slave trading and the racism and fascism. Or Booker doesn't take the baptism and goes on living his life with these sins constantly on his shoulders, but ultimately never doing anything else about it, becoming the Booker that we played through the game as. So you are simultaneously both Comstock and Booker DeWitt. So this is why you have to die. I mean, there was never a case where Booker wasn't going to die in this game, but because of this, it really seals the deal.
Yeah. And this is... I love this because Will the Circle Be Unbroken is playing, and the circle is literally being broken. It's like they took the longest spaghetti noodle in the world and threw it into this jar, and it's one giant loop, and then they snip it by killing Booker DeWitt and Comstock at the same time, because what would have happened is that if he would have accepted his baptism, he would have been born again as Comstock, if that's what he would have chosen, but he evaded that baptism with the preacher in the water. But then, Elizabeth drowns Booker, smothers, and what happens is we have each of the Elizabeths start to disappear until there's one left, and the camera cuts, kind of implying that she's taken away, but at the same time, with how much power she has, does she ever actually disappear? But she can't exist at the same time because, that she is what she is. And it also is revealed later that Annabelle was your wife, and Annabelle gave birth and died during childbirth to Anna, who you name Anna after her mother. But if Annabelle never gave birth, she becomes Lady Comstock.
When is that revealed?
That was something that a little Brian told me.
I must have entirely missed those audio logs because I didn't find that.
Me neither, but that was apparently a thing, is that if you look up Booker DeWitt's wife, that's apparently a whole thing.
That just raises further questions for me. This is it's like the grandfather paradox times a million here.
Yes.
But that's why for me this is it weakens the whole thing, is because they're not dealing with these paradoxes that exist. They're just writing whatever they want to and not thinking about, nobody sat down to say, what if? They just wrote it and said, cool, let's go with it.
See, but I think that that's just it with the quantum physics and the time travel, is that there's a lot of what ifs, because if Booker DeWitt would have accepted that baptism, the Booker that we played as would have accepted that baptism, because in a universe he did, and he became Comstock. But if we would have played and actually gone through with it, we would have seen him turn into Zachary Hill Comstock. We would have seen him drum up people and become the evangelical fascist horrible person that he ended up being. And that's not me saying that evangelicals are horrible. That's not what I'm saying. So just take it easy, everyone. But for lack of a better term right now, that's what I'm saying. But we don't see that, because the Booker we're playing as has to die so that the circle will be in fact broken and the cycle ends. I think that there are a billion what ifs, but we don't see them clearly. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that it brings Infinite to a close. There is a post-credits scene that I guess sets up the DLC of Booker back in his office, and you walk into that side door with the crib, and you say Anna, and you call out to her, but it cuts off before you see who or what is in the crib. So I suppose that sets up the DLC. I'm likely not going to play the DLC, at least not anytime soon. What I am going to do is look up either Let's Plays or in-depth like story analysis of it, because I've already invested like 14 hours of my life into this, so I might as well complete it, because there can't be that much more left. And then, there are videos on YouTube of people smarter than me talking about how all three games kind of fit together. So that'll be interesting to see too. And I think, like you said early on, I think they explore that in the Infinite DLC. I'm pretty sure they do. I think that's Burial at Sea is all about that. But yeah, I don't know. For me, it just does not hold up to Bioshock 1 or the series that it's set up. Not a fun game for me personally. I know.
And I don't.
This is the hardest we've disagreed on anything so far.
I would agree that it's the hardest we've disagreed. But I think the thing is that it is a jumbled mess, and I think that's the point. And that's not me saying so you should like it. I think it is a jumbled mess because of the time travel, because of how things can be interpreted, because it can be interpreted so many different ways. But that's just it. And I think that's why I liked the ending so much, and why it also drove me just a little bit nuts, because, I like things that have this level of incompleteness. I like mystery. I like that little bit of what was actually going on. And I know if I go back and play it, I'm going to learn a whole lot more about the game and about the story. It's sort of like watching Arrested Development a second time. There's a lot of jokes that are in the making that you didn't realize it. They'll ask Buster, hey, give me a hand, in the first season, couple episodes, which we learn later. I don't want to say anything. But anyhow, I feel like that's going to be my experience, but I am going to go on to Burial at Sea. I am going to do it.
If you haven't seen Arrested Development at this point, what are you doing? Go watch that, right now.
Please.
I will give you my personal subscription so you could watch that. It is that good. Classic show.
And if you want to reach Rick and ask him...
Stop it. His phone number and social security number are as follows.
No, I was going to use it as a transition to how you can reach us.
Well, speaking of transitions and Arrested Development, I think we really blew this one out of the water.
You could say that.
Did you like how I took your good transition and just punched it into the dirt so I could do a fumbled transition? Your silence says everything. You don't. It's okay.
I was trying to think about just taking it a whole new direction to punch it deeper into the dirt.
Oh, we're having a fire sale.
That's exactly it.
That's Bioshock Infinite. We did it.
We did it.
Ben, what can the good people at home do if they love the show, which they better?
If you like our program or don't like our program, either is fine. Let us know. One of the ways you can let us know is through our Instagram. You may follow us there. We are Pixel Project Radio Podcast. That is our handle. when it comes to the instant ham, as it were. If you would like to reach out to us via Gmail and have access to Rick's subscription so you can watch Arrested Development, you can reach us at pixelprojectradio@gmail.com, and that leaves only one Richard.
That is our very inactive Twitter, which is at pixelprojectpod. And as always, if you do like the show, what we ask very much is for two things. Mainly, tell people about it. Tell people about it that you think would like it. But also give us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Podcast Addict. That's where we're most likely to see it. And we'll read those on the show as they come in. But mostly word of mouth, so give this a share. Some friends of ours on Instagram, other podcasts have been doing that. We appreciate them extraordinarily much.
We love you guys. Thank you.
Yes, we really do. We've been doing the same for them, trying to share their content too. It's all very good. We don't share anything just to blow smoke up people's butts. It's just good stuff. So thank you to those who have shared. If you haven't, give it a consider. That way we can keep this circle unbroken, but also growing.
Be unbroken. Also, light a candle, say a prayer for Vince tonight, and then responsibly blow out the candle, so that you don't cause any issues. But,
That's it for this week. Thanks for tuning in. We are going to sign off now. We will see you somewhere beyond the sea another time.
Thanks so much for listening, everybody. Take care. Stay safe.
Earthly story, will you join them in their bliss? Will the circle be unbroken by and by? By and by is a better home awaiting in the sky, in the sky, in the joyous days of childhood. Oft they told of wondrous love, pointed to the dying Savior. Now they dwell with him above. Will the circle be unbroken by and by? By and by is a better